Good afternoon. I will call to order the August 29th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Magrino, Slack, Sweezy, Lupipier, Breland, and Rockwell. At this time, I'll ask you to please silence any mobile devices so we're not distracted during the meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the August 15th meeting. May I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Our next item of business is to approve the agenda. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. We'll determine which items will be considered on the consent agenda, which items will be discussed, and which will be continued. So starting at the top of the agenda, item 1 is the new French Bakery addition at 828 Kasota Avenue Southeast. That's a site plan review for an addition to an existing building. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on that item? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 2 is the Quality Coaches fence at 10 West 38th Street. That is an expansion of a non-conforming use. We will discuss item 2. Item 3 is the 1400 Park Avenue apartments at 1400 Park Avenue, 627 East 14th Street, 622 East 15th Street. Several applications for modifying the previously approved applications for a new multifamily building there. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 3? Seeing no one, we'll put item 3 on consent. Item 4 is Tony's Auto Repair at 4049 Fremont Avenue North. 3 applications for a commercial building there. We'll continue item 4 to the September 19th meeting. And finally, item 5 is at 200 Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast. Several applications for a new residential and commercial building there. We will discuss item 5. And that is all the items we have to consider today. So our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 1 and 3 will be on consent. We'll discuss items 2 and 5, and item 4 will be continued to September 19th. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue item 4 to the September 19th meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. We have no committee of the whole report for today, so we'll move on to the public hearing portion of the meeting, and at this time I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. That is items 1 and 3. Is there anyone wishing to speak on items 1 or 3? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our items for discussion. We'll start with item 2, the Quality Coaches fence, 10 West 38th Street, and staff is Ms. Smith.
Good evening, President Brown and Commissioners. My name is Mei-Ling Smith, and Jim Hanvick, on behalf of Mark Brandow of Quality Coaches, has submitted an application for an expansion of non-conforming use at the property 10 38th Street West. The property contains a 1-story brick building that has had an auto repair business and restoration business in operation since 1985. There is also an on-site surface parking area behind the building. The applicant is proposing to increase the height of the barbed wire portion on the existing fence. It sits atop a chain link fence, and the fence faces the east and the west sides of the property on either side of the parking area, and the parking area stores customers' cars. The existing barbed wire has been determined to be a legally non-conforming use, as it is not otherwise allowed in the C2 district, but it did exist prior to the prohibition on barbed wire in all districts except industrially zoned properties. So here you can see the property highlighted. It's C2 zoning. It's surrounded by low density residential uses, and commercial uses. There's a wide range of uses in the area, but mostly fall under the category of residential and commercial uses. The site is nearest the intersection of 38th Street West and Nicollet Avenue, just a few buildings in from that intersection. And that intersection is they are two community corridors, Nicollet Avenue and also 38th Street West. And the property is within the commercial node, neighborhood commercial node at 38th Street West and Nicollet Avenue. Here's a slightly closer view of an aerial shot of the property, so you can see the existing building and also the on-site parking lot behind the building. So as I mentioned before, there already is an existing chain link fence with barbed wire on either side of the parking area. Currently, there is razor wire on top of the fence, barbed wire plus looped razor wire, and the applicant has stated that the razor wire is necessary to keep out people who want to steal parts from the cars within the parking area. An expansion of nonconforming use is required for this alteration. It would increase the height of the barbed wire portion by about 6 inches, so a total of a 9-foot, 10-inch tall fence overall. In addition, they're proposing to change the configuration of the barbed wire portion. So instead of having it in line with the chain link fence, it would be cantilevered toward the inside of the parking lot. And this is required because the applicant is not allowed to keep the razor wire on the property. The razor wire is a prohibited use. It's not considered to be legally non-conforming in this case. So they're able to keep barbed wire and apply for the expansion of a non-conforming use that way. This is the section of the zoning code that highlights what are permitted materials and what are hazardous and prohibited materials in the zoning code. So razor wire is one of those prohibited materials. Barbed wire is limited to industrial zoning districts only if it is located more than 100 feet from a residence or office residence district. So here's the view of the parking area from Nicollet. So you can see it sort of set behind this building that's facing Nicollet. There's mesh covering the chain link portion, and then there's razor wire and barbed wire right above the chain link. And this is a closer view on the bottom. Here is a view from 38th Street West. So this is the street, this is the frontage of the existing building. You can see residential uses to the west. There's a residential alley that separates the building from the residential uses. And then this is a view directly from the alley. So to approve an expansion of nonconforming use, there's 6 required findings, and staff is recommending denial of this application based on, in particular, findings numbers 1, 2, and 4. So first, whether a rezoning of the property would be inappropriate. This is, in the staff analysis, we covered that barbed wire is allowed in industrial districts, but only if it's 100 feet from the residential use or property. Even if this applicant were to successfully rezone the property to an industrial district, the barbed wire fence still would not be allowed because it's directly adjacent to residential uses. Also, it probably would not get rezoned because it's located in a mixed-use area with designated land use features such as the commercial node and then the 2 community corridors. For finding number 2, whether the enlargement, expansion, or relocation of the property of the expansion of nonconforming use would be compatible with adjacent property in the neighborhood. Staff finds that it would not be compatible with the nearby residential and commercial uses. And normally only wood, metal, or brick fence materials are allowed in these types of areas. And then also finding number 4, the finding is whether the proposal would result in improvements to the property that also improve the appearance or stability of the neighborhood. And staff finds that because the fence would be visible from both Nicollet Avenue and from the low density residential uses to the west, this would not result in an improvement in the appearance or stability of the neighborhood. And then there are additional findings as well. So 6 letters have been submitted in support of this application, and they've been included in your packets tonight. The Kingfield Neighborhood Association has not provided comment, and I'll now close my portion of the presentation and allow the applicant to speak.
All right. And commissioners, first, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wondered if there were, I know this is a business that's been in the neighborhood for a long time and there's folks who are supportive. Is there a compromise that has some of the area of the fence that's not visible from the public, or another way to think about allowing some of the fence to go forward and not other parts? Or
That was not presented to staff, so we haven't made our analysis based on any of those sorts of compromises. So, and I'm not sure if that would change any of our findings either.
Commissioner Lupke-Pier and then Commissioner Rockwell.
Mei-Ling, do we have any idea when the original barbed wire fencing went up? How long it's been in place?
I do not, but you might be able to ask the applicant that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rockwell.
So I have a question based on sort of the process of your analysis. So in your analysis of the findings, you looked at, and I guess I'm looking specifically at required finding number 2, that the enlargement, expansion, et cetera, will be compatible with adjacent property in the neighborhood. So in your analysis here, you looked at the compatibility with the neighborhood and analyzed the neighborhood feel and so forth, zoning. And, you know, in past expansion of nonconforming use staff reports, we've seen a comparison not only to the surrounding neighborhood, but to the existing condition. Mm-hmm. And so we've seen staff reports that have said, well, you know, this may or may not be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, depending on the report, but it is certainly better than what we have. And this in the letters from the applicant in our packet, or the applicant's attorney, or I'm not sure, essentially makes an argument like that, which is that this would be, the proposed fence would be better than the existing semi-dilapidated fence. And so my question is, in many ways extends beyond this application. But what is the standard that we should be looking at? Should we be looking at whether a change is better than the existing condition? Should we take that into consideration? Or should we really only be looking at how that expansion of a nonconforming use would be compatible with the surrounding area? And I think, again, this is a question that extends beyond this, but I think the commission, I would benefit from clarification, because I agree with your analysis here that the comparison to the existing use is not in the findings and shouldn't be considered. But I would like some clarification in general.
Mr. Wittenberg.
Commissioners, Commissioner Rockwell, I'd say that the answer to your question is that it's both. In finding number 2, it addresses compatibility generally, which you're speaking about compatibility with the surroundings in a more general sense. But finding number 4 actually addresses improvement over the current condition. So I'd say both of those aspects are part of the expansion of nonconforming use analysis.
Okay, and so, but those are separate findings, so you have to find both. They are not wrapped up into the same finding in which one could find either.
I'd say it's a pretty gray area where the line is between those 2 findings.
Okay.
But yes, you could look at them as somewhat distinct, but it's a pretty blurry line between those 2 things.
Okay.
Okay, are there any further questions of staff? Hearing none, at this time I'll open the public hearing on this item, and I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first. So please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Yeah, come to the center microphone.
My name is Jim Hanvick. I happen to be a lawyer by trade, but I really perceive my role here to be more in the nature of a customer of Quality Coaches as well as a neighbor. And I have been involved sort of sporadically in the application process. And so with this body's permission, I think I have about 3 minutes of ill-prepared remarks, if I may. So first of all, I'm not so sure I would call this an expansion, although that's the nomenclature that's used in this process. There's no question that the barbed wire that's already present is in fact a conforming use. It's grandfathered in. I'm not so sure, in fact, there are restrictions to it, but at any rate, under the old statute, as far as height or anything else. But in reality, I've tried to look at the pros and the cons here, as I do in my job every day, and I see no cons and I see only pros. First of all, this is going to be an improvement. We're replacing old barbed wire that's been there for no one really knows, but a long, long time. I spoke to Shel Berg, who owns Morton Volvo, that used to be in that location back in the 50s and 60s, even a bit before my time. And he talked about having to bring Dobermans onto the premises, but the barbed wire was present there. So there's no question that the barbed wire is conforming because it is grandfathered in at the moment. So so the plan is to simply cant the supporting posts out a bit that will support the new barbed wire. Fairly simple, to the extent you can say barbed wire has any aesthetic qualities. It's new material as opposed to this decades-old material, so no question there. It will be more effective as far as security goes on the premises. This is not only good for this business. We don't want to be driving people like this out of the city. And so to provide security, he has had break-ins. To provide security is very important for the type of business this is. He has high-end cars there. I've always had old cars and motorcycles, particularly old British cars and motorcycles, and that's a specialty of Quality Coaches. So I've known these folks for a long time. I'd be concerned if my car, if there were break-ins constantly, and there have been break-ins, and he's simply trying to, as unobtrusively as possible, enhance the security there. That incidentally will make his insurers a lot happier in addition to his customers. There's no question, I think there are materials in the application packet that indicate that Mark Rando, who is here and is the owner of Quality Coaches, is an extremely well-regarded citizen there. He's active in all the community organizations and everything else. He's got an extremely high degree of support from the community. It would be different if we were proposing an extra 10, 20, 30 feet or something like this. It's 6 inches. And in fact, measured vertically is probably less than that because of the cantilever design that's proposed. So there are other considerations as well. Simply the fact that this will deter crime in the neighborhood. This happens to be a pretty good neighborhood, and I put together about 3 years ago a big garage of my own, as a matter of fact, and I was very pleased with the process and how the city worked with me hand in hand. I'm a little surprised at the somewhat rejection out of hand of what ought to be a pretty simple process in my view. And as I say, just in my own experience, it's a little out of my area, in fact, of practice, but in my own experience with building my own garage, I was very pleased that the city was very cooperative, and when we encounter a problem, we were able to overcome the problem and do what we had to do to deal with it. So I'm not so sure I have a whole lot more here. I'm not I have no illusions that my lawyerly rhetoric is going to sway any minds or anything else, but I think it's
Okay.
pretty straightforward. But if
Yeah.
I may, I'd like to ask if anyone else we have. I know.
Well, I think Commissioner Lupipier has a question of you.
Okay, sure.
So we could start there.
Yeah, hi. Can you maybe detail what other means of securing the vehicles you guys have explored in this process other than barbed wire, razor wire, raising the fence height?
There have been. There actually, what was probably the most effective has been the razor wire that was there. And again, in the materials, there was some confusion by, in fact, one of the inspectors saying razor wire, barbed wire, it's the same thing. I don't think that really is the question, but that's what Mr.
Well, in
Brando was
addition to
saying.
that, though, have you looked at other means of creating a secure environment for these vehicles?
As well, as far as different premises, or as far as, for example, video cameras or alarm systems?
Cameras,
or
eyes
something?
on the street, perhaps creating better sight lines. I don't know.
Well, I know that he has looked at some of those options, but this appeared to be the most efficient, the quickest, the easiest, and again, frankly, the least disruptive to the the look and feel of the city, if you will, of that particular section of the city. So I would expect there are, I don't know, probably lots of options, but nevertheless, this appears to be straightforward, simple, economical, and effective.
I have a question.
Sure.
Obviously, there are a lot of auto repair businesses in Minneapolis. How do you believe that this situation is different from any other instance where a mechanic has to store vehicles overnight outdoors?
Right. I'm not so sure it is different from those, as a matter of fact, but I know that there have been similar instances in the neighborhood, including with some of the residents who've had some of their own vehicles there. But I expect that if you see some high-end exotic cars sitting there, and it's pretty accessible, and again, this has happened. I know it happened with a Jensen Healy. I know the Jensen Healy pretty well. And I know it happened with a BMW. Those parts are valuable. And of course, if an easy mark like that in the neighborhood is perceived by some of the bad guys out there who make a living this way, they're going to be there. If they're and obviously if that may attract them to other residences in that neighborhood, in that area, as well as other businesses that might be subject to that. So again, to my knowledge, no one is objecting to it. Nobody in the neighborhood, nobody else. In fact, again, this is a popular business there. I don't want to drive them to way outstate Minnesota. We want businesses like this in the city.
All right. Commissioner Slack, did you have a question?
Yeah, just for clarification.
And incidentally, pardon me for saying that, I think it's allergies, but at any rate, I'm stuffed up here and I'm not hearing as well as I ordinarily would. So let me apologize beforehand.
Clarification. So it's an improved non-conforming use. What initiated the need to take down the barbed wire and put up razor wire in the first place? Because based on the information that we have, it seems that once the barbed wire went up, whenever it went up, that there weren't any issues with vandalism or break-ins or security. So what initiated taking the current barbed wire down and putting up razor wire?
Well, actually, if I may, there have been instances there, again, going back before Quality Coaches took over that space. That's why I say it happens that I had lunch today with a partner of Shell Berg. So I've known Mr. Berg for a long time, and he's been the owner or an associate of O.I. Borton Motors for a long, long time. And he talked about way back when the barbed wire was there. Again, we're going back some decades. He had two Dobermans patrolling the area. I guess this gets back to the question too: is that what we want? Is to have guard dogs patrolling the area? So there now, since the razor wire went up, and my client concedes that the razor wire is non-conforming. Again, there had been some confusion in that regard, but in fact, there have been instances of, the way the barbed wire sits right now, it's pretty easy. These people know this here. They take off a jacket, they throw it over, and they slither over it, and then, a piece of carpeting will do the job. So there have been instances of vandalism, not since the razor wire went up, but again, we concede that the razor wire's got to come down. But we'd like to have this job all done simultaneously. It simply makes sense for a number of reasons, but take down the razor wire and put up the new barbed wire, which again, as I say, there's no question the razor wire or the barbed wire that's there right now is permissible, not under the new ordinance, but under the old, and it's grandfathered in.
So at 9'4" with barbed wire, there's still security issues. And then I guess a question for staff for Jason, is the applicant able to just put barbed wire back on the existing fence? Or because the razor wire has been installed, what does that allow the applicant to do moving forward?
Jason, if you want to take a stab at that.
Okay, is that permissible for Mr. Brandow to address?
Yeah, we can absolutely move on to some other speakers. All right. So, all right. And also, just so I have a sense, how many of you would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone else here? All right. So we have a couple people. So, yeah, go ahead and please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Mark Brando. I run Quality Coaches, and my wife and I own the building separately. I moved in there in '85 and was unaware of any problem with the backyard, but I've since learned that in the 60s, the Borton Volvo people had a continuing problem with the existing barbed wire, which is 3 strands, lateral, no special enhancements. When I got in there, I got occasional calls from the police that people were pinching gauges out of MGs or whatever, and it didn't become a serious issue until they went in with sawzalls and started cutting off exhaust systems looking for the platinum piece that's worth money. So those guys ended up getting one off a customer's BMW that cost $1,000 or $1,500 to fix. I sought an immediate response to that because I couldn't justify taking customers' cars out and spending for repairs that were damaged by vandals in my care. So I put the razor wire on over the barbed wire. The barbed wire still goes through there, but the razor wire is looped over. That was a desperate means to cure the vandalism that was happening, because now it was affecting customers' cars, as well as an old Jensen that had the exhaust system cut up so badly it was not repairable. I ended up discarding the car at a discount because I couldn't make it work. Parts would have to come from England. But when Julie Casey came and wrote me up in November of last year for one of her points to remove the razor wire a la Ordinance 385.2 hazardous fences, I was quick to reference that code. And the ordinance states, on all properties owned other than residential, barbed wire may be permitted on the top of a fence, provided that no strand of barbed wire is less than 6½ feet above the ground level below. When I called Julie and asked her, geez, you mentioned razor wire and it references barbed wire in the code definition, what are we talking about? She said, well, disregard that one, barbed wire, razor wire, it's all the same. City staff was a little confused over how to classify the razor wire that I had installed as an enhanced security provision. But I took her at her task. I didn't do anything until January when the ordinance enforcer, Mr. Steve Weckman, wrote me a note, said the razor wire's got to come down. I said, but Julie told me it was okay. I've been working on other things. At that point, Joe Giant wrote me a synopsis of how the codes had changed over time, and in 1999, the new code definition forbade razor wire. I didn't know that barbed wire was also excluded, but if I'm being grandfathered in by the old code ordinance that predates my putting up the razor wire, I would expect that the parameters would permit me to enhance the razor wire, which was insufficient by prior understanding. I'm going to ask Jerry from Jerry's Towing to come up here because he can tell you what happened when he took down his barbed wire. I'm not interested in apologizing to people when their Jaguar or Mercedes-Benz is damaged by vandals and I can't get parts to repair it properly. I think it would be a prohibitive and expensive, costly provision. I've been a resident at that address as a business for 30 years, and I've had good relations with all my neighbors. So the gentleman that wrote a support letter lives just across the alley and said the razor wire has gone up and there's been no activity in my backyard of evenings and weekends. I just got a letter of support from Joan Nemec, who served 10 years on the city council. She's a friend in the neighborhood. She urged your support. I didn't get that forwarded to your packet in time, but certainly I would submit that if I carry this further. At this point, I would like to at least tell you that I spent 20 years on the Planning Commission in Minneapolis, and I can understand your dilemma, but certainly the sanity and the security of a business needs to be preferential over how it looks. You can see comments from Julene at the hardware store or Gail at Blackbird's. They don't think there's any affront to the business node by the way it looks because it's all behind the building. Nothing's really visible from the street, and even from Necklet, it's a bit obscured. I did put up all the screening in the cyclone fence at city direction. So I've had an expensive process of trying to keep the vandals out and keep things secure back there. And I need to at least put an enhanced barbed wire configuration on at the point I take down the razor wire. But Jerry, if you'd come up here, my insurance agent said,
I think we have a couple commissioners that have questions of you.
Okay,
first,
no,
so
I'd be
why
glad
don't
to
we
answer
have
them.
them?
I'd like to
ask,
say that my
those
insurance
and-
agent tells me that the best posture is a good deterrent. And a good deterrent will preclude anybody getting hurt. Nobody's going to climb 8 feet up to go try to scale a fence if it's insurmountable. So I've got the deterrent factor covered.
All right. Commissioner Sweezy, then Commissioner Lupipier.
Thank you. I didn't hear, are there security cameras?
I didn't put security cameras in because I'm not of the attitude that I want to chase hoodies down the alley after dark when there's a problem potentially. There's been gun violence in the neighborhood in the past, and I don't choose to, follow people with cameras blaring and, pointing fingers. So I think it's hard to prove anything. And once the vandalism has been done, it's hard to repair. And at least at my expense, it would be a costly undertaking. Most vandals don't have spare change to put into repairs.
So do you not think that the presence of visible cameras is a deterrent either?
Well, I could put out a sign saying cameras. I could put out a sign saying high voltage beware. I mean, I've already got it posted, no trespassing. I think that should be an obvious deterrent if people are law-abiding citizens.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lupipier.
So when did the razor wire actually get installed?
I think it was about 5 years ago. I can't remember. It was out of a distress mode when I didn't want to have those guys getting in and pilfering parts off Jaguars. I have cars waiting for parts coming from England, and I don't always have the potential to drive them in at night. If they're outside immobilized and the part is 3 weeks out in England, I need to leave them there until I can get the
So
pieces
in the
back.
15, 20 years you owned the business, it was until 5 years ago when you put the razor wire up and then you got cited last November for it. Is that
I
accurate?
only got cited in November. Julie Casey came around and she's the lead license inspector. I'm just in the process of renewing my license application, and she, I guess, did it because she was picking on me at that corner on that day. I don't know Julie well enough.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions for the speaker, we can move on to some other speakers and
Jerry, can you speak to what's
come to the
happening in your
microphone
business?
and please state your name and address for the record. And I should mention too, since obviously we have a lot of people here for another item, if you don't mind keeping
My
your
name
remarks
is,
fairly brief.
Name is Jerry Hamilton on C&J Auto Sales on Lake Street. The city, a few years back, I had barbed wire on my fence. My fence was installed back in the early 80s. And they gave me a citation, made me take the barbed wire off. This property that he's got here, I was towing over there, also on a small towing business. And I was towing cars into there when it was a body shop back in the early 80s. And back in those days, they were theft there at that location. People would climb over the fence, stuff, 6 foot high fence. They can throw a coat up there and go over it like a deer. After the city made me remove mine, within 30 days of taking the barbed wire off, I was broken into right over top of the fence. Over $10,000 worth of stereo equipment was taken out of one car that we had in there for that day. Not covered for insurance, came out of my pocket. This past year, there was over 10,000 again. They went over the fence, they hot wired a car, and they started ramming the two gates from Oakland Avenue to the other. If the wire had been up there, there wouldn't have been any damage, I don't think. They wouldn't have came over. And he's got his alley back there is sort of dark at night. I know it from towing in there from years back. I have put up, since I've put up, I think I've got 6 floodlights. My electric bill's automatically 200 and something a month just for the lighting that I have on the outside.
Right.
If he takes it down, it's fair game for the thugs. That's basically all I've got, I guess.
Right. Thank you. If there are no questions, we can move on to other speakers, and we have at least one other person. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Jessica Reinhardt. I live at 4740 Bryant Avenue South. I frequent the 38th and Nicollet intersection often. I go to 5 Watt Coffee across the street. I have to tell you, anytime I've walked down that street, you don't notice that parking lot from the street. You're looking at the storefronts that are 50 feet in front. So really, as far as the visual component of this, it's a non-issue. You don't notice that fence from the street of Nicollet, and you don't notice it from 38th Street either. There have been letters from the neighbor that's right across the alley, on the alley side, saying, I like this fence the way it is. It keeps people out of my block and out of the area from stealing things. If you look at the criminal reports that have happened, you will see that there has been a drop over the years. But the easier we make it for people to get in and steal things, the more they come back in our neighborhoods. And so I think it really is a service to the neighborhood to have something, as long as it's not, it's not visual. It's not a problem that way. It's a service to the neighborhood to have more security in the area. I'd like to address Commissioner Slack's question about why the razor wire needs to come down. I know that Mark did mention that the inspectors came in last November and told him they needed to take it down. But in my conversations, I'm also the representative for the Southwest Business Association, and so I've been coordinating with Mark through this issue. My understanding is that when you did put up the razor wire, you did consult with city staff to try and meet code. And Mark was verbally told that what he did should be allowable. And so I don't think that Mark was out to break the rules and do something that wasn't allowed in the first place. I think that that should be considered. And the fact is that he's just trying to get something that gives him the comparable security. As far as Commissioner Sweezy's question about, or maybe it was Commissioner Lupke here, about have you thought of any other things like cameras? Putting cameras up, it videotapes the incident happening. It might help catch someone after the fact, but these people, in my experience, that are into stealing these expensive parts, they know they're going to get away with it. It doesn't stop them from doing the damage. And as Mark and the other gentleman who owns a car shop commented, the damages are really high. And so they can't necessarily afford to have that expense on the front end and hope that the criminal is caught on the end.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And is there anyone else? Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert Cox, and I was Mark's insurance advisor and agent for over 10 years. We inspect his building every 3 years and make any suggestions for improved safety for his employees and customers that enter the property. Mark always complied in an orderly manner to bring everything up to date. We photographed the building. We know the back wire is there. We have no objections to it. From a liability issue, we have known it's been there, like I say, for the last 10 years. We've photographed the property. So from a liability issue, we don't have any issues with it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. One more speaker. Please state your name and address.
I'll be real quick. My name is Carl Craig, and I work for Mr. Brando. In the past, they've had people, break into the little impound lot or the parking lot in the back and like stole a bicycle. But anyway, one of the barbed wire across the top, it discourages the opportunists. That if somebody's walking along and they look through the fence, say, well, I'd like to go take a look at whatever is beyond the fence, they can, it's easy to go over the fence if it's not hard to go over the fence. If you're a little more organized and you happen to be a thief and you have, a wire cutter in your pocket, you can go over to the post where the chain link is hooked to the post and go clip, 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 pull the fence aside and just walk through like a closet door and go in, but that takes a little bit of organization and planning. And so the barbed wire, discourages the opportunists. It doesn't, if you're not an opportunist and you're not, climbing up the fence, then you're not going to get tangled up in it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And are there any other speakers on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we just have one application, the expansion of a non-conforming use. Commissioner Luke-Pierre.
I actually had one question for the applicant, just real quickly. In the 5 years you've had the razor wire, have you had any incidences of vandalism in the back?
Please come to the microphone
Sorry.
if you don't mind, so it's recorded.
Mark Brando, 20 West 38th Street, Quality Coaches. I have not had any that I know about, and I've never seen the razor wire sagging in a way that shows that it was compromised. The old barbed wire that was in place, you could see where it was sagging right off the back of the Salvation Army building in a way that showed people had been climbing over and depressed the barbed wire. But the razor wire is factually insurmountable without damage. And so it's, it says people may get hurt, but I think that is in fact the deterrent action we're trying to use to keep people away. This isn't going to be easy to scale. And so it keeps people out of there. And I've been happy to say that I haven't had any further consequences that I've had to pay for. The occasional person getting in there to rifle coin trays or glove boxes was always an annoyance. But my mechanics won't park their Chevy trucks in the backyard anymore for fear that if they leave them there overnight, those will have the exhaust systems cut away because the truck catalytic converter is quite expensive.
But not since you put in the razor wire.
Pardon me?
But they have not been afraid to park there with the razor wire? Or they're
No,
still
I
afraid?
haven't had any customer cars damaged, and I haven't had anybody getting in there to cause any harm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions, commissioners, or would someone like to start off the discussion with a motion? Commissioner Vreeland.
Yes. So I'm not a barbed wire expert, nor a razor wire expert. The hazardous and prohibited material, is there a why kind of explanation? I mean, it's allowed in some places and not allowed. So in some places it's hazardous, and some places it's not. Is there some background? And one of the things that I'm thinking about is, certainly the visual, the look of razor wire is an anti-personnel deterrent. The barbed wire is more cows and people, and is very different feeling. If the razor wire were on the interior and not seen, does that make it less hazardous? Does it make it less prohibited? Is this a visual problem? And I just don't know enough of the history of what hazardous and prohibited means.
Yeah, Mei-Ling, maybe you could answer that.
I'm not sure if I can speak to why, but the razor wire is prohibited everywhere in the city. And then the barbed wire is only allowed in industrial districts and subject to certain conditions. But I just wanted to clarify that the motion today has to do with just expanding the barbed wire portion. And so it's not about whether to allow the razor wire or not. The applicant has proposed this barbed wire configuration in lieu of, or just because they have to remove the razor wire no matter what.
Thank you.
Right. Commissioner Rockwell.
I'll start us off with a motion. So I move to allow the expansion of nonconforming use. I think from the testimony and from the documents submitted, we've had a lot of people from the neighborhood speak that in favor of the barbed wire, and I think that speaks to compatibility with the neighborhood and adjacent property. And that's expanded beyond whether it's visible or not, but also to safety issues. I also think the safety issues go to finding number 4, improving the stability of the neighborhood. I'm not sure it improves the appearance of the neighborhood, but it's appearance or stability, not and stability. And so I'd like to make that motion.
Right. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Lupke here.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with this, not because I'm not sympathetic to the applicant, but going to Commissioner Breland's question as to why we don't allow this, kind of what's good for the gander is good for the goose. If it's okay for one neighborhood to have barbed wire and the perception of the neighborhood is it's safe, then why not everyone on the block having barbed wire? And pretty soon we're creating and perpetuating a feeling in a neighborhood that that it's unsafe. I think that in general, it's not so much that it's unattractive on its own, although it's not attractive, and that it's not safe, or it's the perception it creates. And when we talk about passive design principles around creating safe and secure environments, the thing that does not rise to the forefront is barbed wire and things that are prison-like when we create communities and neighborhoods. So when we asked, is it just a case of is it better than what we have now, I wholeheartedly say that that is not the standard by which we want to make decisions in the city in regard to zoning and planning. It is not the standard, or else less opportune areas of the city will forever be chasing the more opportune ones, and that is not, I think, a way to grow our city in a responsible, sustainable, and equitable way. So the struggle I have in this particular instance is it is an existing condition. It changes the height by approximately 6 inches, replacing barbed wire with barbed wire, and the immediate neighbors, the neighborhood, apparently are not concerned with that 6-inch difference. So in that specific regard, I could see it as more of a maintenance on that existing use, almost more than an expansion of the non-conforming use, in which case I could lean toward voting in favor of the motion. But if it were a case of changing it to razor wire, adding additional barbed wire, or adding barbed wire for use that has not demonstrated a need for it, I would have to wholeheartedly not support it. So I hope that that sets this apart in terms of being an outlier to the overall issue and not a precedent-setting idea that will have further impacts on other areas of the city that are perhaps less fortunate than this one.
Commissioner Sweezy.
Yeah, thank you. I'm struggling with this too, for some of the similar reasons and some different ones. I think that there are better and improved ways to protect the public safety necessarily than a physical, painful barrier. I think one of the other reasons that you don't see this in neighborhoods is, again, is the safety maybe to other people. There's, greater population, younger people, and all of that. I think also that persons who perpetrate property crimes are opportunists, like one of the speakers said. Others are very well planned. I think, and this isn't a discussion about us telling you which security measures you should use, but I think cameras are important. I think they're a good modern tool. I think in the event they don't prevent something, they at least help, property owners and police solve the crimes. They can pick up things that are happening otherwise in the neighborhood that can help with that too. I think that they're important, and I think for me, this sort of single way to expand this non-conforming use, I'm struggling with that. I don't necessarily, I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to it, but I think there are other ways to prevent and deal with crime.
Commissioner Magrino, then Commissioner Patrick.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the issue that the applicant has here, but this really strikes me as maybe a situation where it may be the very beginning of a complicated bureaucratic process, the applicant maybe got an answer that he didn't want, and it sort of spiraled into this whole situation involving a lot of different people and a lot of parts of the city bureaucracy. And, you know, there are other ways to deal with the issue that you're having there that don't involve expanding the non-conforming use. You know, there are regulations we have across the city that at first maybe seem onerous, but kind of make sense when you think about it. You can't put a refrigerator and a freezer out on the curb with the doors on, because the kid knocks it over, the kid could die. I mean, this is a situation where if you're putting barbed wire up, you know, I don't know, wind could blow the fence down, it could hurt somebody, have barbed wire flying around. So I'm sympathetic to the issue, but I don't see how it's on the city to secure this specific property. If Target built a store in C2 zoning and wanted to store stereos outside, we wouldn't let them build a fence with barbed wire on it. So for that reason, I'm not going to be supporting the motion.
Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is a very thoughtful discussion. Sometimes these very small projects in neighborhoods get a lot of our attention. I will support the motion. I think there are reasonable arguments on both sides, but I think in this case, it is reasonable to see this as an expansion, or not as an expansion, but rather a replacement of the non-conforming fence. And again, because of the you know, if the impacts are best measured by those who are most impacted, it seems like those folks are in favor of this. And so I think it is reasonable for us to agree with them and support this particular fence.
Commissioner Lupi-Pierre.
I just wanted to say that regardless of the outcome of this vote, perhaps considering a fence that isn't scalable like chain link, something that's more permeable and not opaque screening to not create an opportunity for criminals to get over there and then do what they want without being seen. I mean, there's lots of passive ways that you could look to improve your lot and probably reduce your insurance deductible that would be more attractive, in addition to actually being more successful at deterring crime than chain link with screening like this. So just not to stop at the one-stop thing for solving the problems, but perhaps bring down other opportunities that apparently since the 60s have been there and perhaps are causing some of the problems you're having.
And Commissioner Slack.
Yeah, a lot of great conversation. I'm somewhat surprised that fence manufacturers can't figure out a security measure in this capacity that would serve the needs of the business and be also visually acceptable to urban environment. I'm going to support the motion mainly because I like to always think contextually about how an issue or a project like this affects its surroundings. Obviously, you have support of your neighbors and those businesses adjacent to the property, but also looking at a lot of the images that were provided as part of the packet. This fence really isn't visible from my viewpoint from the street. The fact that you've actually upgraded the fence, what is chain link, to include some sort of mesh material to cover it, actually makes, from my standpoint, it look a lot better. And I like the fact that the fence doesn't allow you to look into the backyard storage area, which if you look at the aerial view that was provided in the packet, isn't really something that you want to look at anyways. And so the fact that you've already taken a lot of measures to be a good neighbor and to visually block some of those view sheds is great. So I also see this as just enhancing the non-conforming use, upgrading non-conforming use, and not expanding it.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Freeland.
Aye.
Sweezy.
No.
Slack.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Magrino.
No.
Lipke-Pierre.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
So that is 5-2.
All right, and that motion to approve the expansion of a non-conforming use carries. That concludes our discussion on item 2. Our next item for discussion is item 5, and Ms. Widmeyer is staff.
Good afternoon. This is the project at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 Second Street North or Southeast. We've seen this project a couple of times at Committee of the Whole, so I won't go through everything thoroughly, but I will give a brief overview, just to remind you of the proposal and applications that are being requested. The proposal is for a mixed-use building with 214 dwelling units and commercial on the ground floor. On the ground floor, they're proposing commercial along Central Avenue. The main residential entrance would be facing 2nd Street with a portico share in between the entrance and the street. That's also where their entrance to their parking ramp is. There'd be some below grade parking as well as 3 stories above grade. And then moving up in the building on the floors 2 through 3, there's some liner housing facing Central on half of 2nd Street to block some of the parking. Backing up, sorry. That portico share, because of that, they need a variance of the pedestrian-oriented overlay district standards because the building is first floor of the building wall is more than 8 feet from the lot line adjacent to 2nd Street. So I'm moving back up the building. Above the 4th floor is where the tower begins. And so on the right there, you can see the total height is 42 stories. That includes a mechanical level and an elevator overrun. So that's where we get to the 42 stories. Then the overall height measured to the top of that decorative cap is just over 483 feet. So they need a conditional use permit to allow the proposed height. And in the C2 district, the allowed height is 4 stories, 56 feet. They'll also need a floor area ratio variance. Again, in the C2 district, they're allowed to have 2.04 of FAR, and the proposed amount is 14.42. And then lastly, they need site plan review. One thing that has changed since this was last viewed at Committee of the Whole is that they've added some more exterior bike parking, so along Central Avenue and 2nd Street, that has been incorporated. And because we've, some of the correspondence that you've received today has to do with some past review processes. I'm going to jump back a little bit to those. First of all, this has completed the heritage preservation review process. Both the demolition of the existing buildings have been approved and the new building as well. And those were appealed to the City Council. So the City Council has acted on that. The current plans are in compliance with those approvals. And then prior to that occurring, there was a petition for an EAW. And that was something that was denied by the City Council as well. The petitioner for that EAW contended that the project was subject to a mandatory EAW because the project was not consistent with the comp plan and it contained more than 150 attached units. They also had contended that there would be potential for significant environmental effects that included various things such as traffic impacts, visual impacts, and shadowing of historic properties, among other things. But again, the council had determined that this project was in compliance with the comprehensive plan and that it would not have the potential for those significant environmental effects. And part of that was because our review process already cover those things in many ways. So an EAW was not necessary to further analyze those aspects. So now moving ahead to the findings and the staff report, I'll start with the conditional use permit and the FAR variance. Those are substantially similar, so they're pretty much covered, they're pretty much the same. We found that the proposed height and FAR are consistent with the comprehensive plan. The site is located in the East Hennepin Activity Center, where up to 800 dwelling units per acre is supported. This proposal is at about 268 dwelling units per acre, so it's well within that range. The small area plan, the Mercy Homes Neighborhood Master Plan, also indicates that higher density residential development is appropriate here, and that's because this is located on a transportation and a transit corridor and near a large commercial center. So we found that to achieve the desired density, the height and FAR variances or increases are necessary. This site, as indicated, is in a mixed-use area. There's a range of densities. 1 to 26 stories in height are found surrounding this site. This is also in a historic district. So just looking at the uses most directly adjacent to this property, to the north you have the former Pillsbury Library. That's a low-rise building about 1 to 2 stories. In the staff report, it's referenced as 1 story, but it sticks out of the ground a little bit. So on their drawing, it shows it as 2 stories. That's a contributing building to the district. To the east is a 9-level parking ramp. To the south across 2nd Street is a condominium building, 12 stories in height. And then as you go across Central, you have some townhomes, Chute Square, and Art Godfrey House. Those are contributing. The park is contributing to the historic district for reference. So we did acknowledge that the proposed height is a substantial deviation from what is allowed in the C2 district, but we did find that the height and scale is compatible with the other buildings in the area. So here you can see an aerial of the surrounding properties, and just to give you an idea, that with this building being proposed at 384 feet, again taller than the other buildings, but the adjacent parking ramp is just under 100 feet tall. The Winslow House condos across the street to the south are at about 180 feet tall, and Larive condominium, which is just across from the townhouses, so kind of west of this site, that's at 310 feet. And to help minimize impacts to surrounding properties, the building has been designed in a way to do that. First of all, it's split into 2 components, the podium and the tower. So the podium consists of the first 4 floors of the building. It's about 59 feet at the top of the parapet wall. And the footprint of the podium does occupy most of the site, but is also oriented to the street grid. And then the tower rises up from there, but the footprint of the tower is about half of the footprint of the podium. It's also set back, as you can see in the image in the upper right corner. It's set back from the streets as well as the adjacent property to the north. There's more than 30 feet separating the tower from the adjacent contributing property or structure. So what we concluded is that the design of the building results in maintaining adequate access and light to surrounding properties. The applicant had also submitted a shadow study, and given the context of the area, we also found that the shadowing impacts would not be significant. We also looked at the preservation of views of landmark buildings, significant open spaces, and water bodies. First, looking at the adjacent Pillsbury Library, the building would impede views of that building, but a 4-story building that would be allowed by the district would also impede those same views, so it would not be any greater with the increase in height or FAR. The Chute Square, as I mentioned, and our Godfrey House in the Mississippi River are also nearby, but we also found that no significant view corridors would be blocked of the historic district as well. Those would not be impeded. One other component that we looked at was impacts to traffic congestion in the surrounding area. This site, the proposal is, or rather it would meet or exceed the minimum vehicle, bicycle, and loading requirements. So in total, there's 389 parking spaces on the site. Those would be dedicated to residential uses. The restaurant that's proposed on the ground floor would lease parking from the adjacent parking ramp, which has excess capacity. I also mentioned earlier that they're proposing short-term bike parking. Again, that is in excess of what is required. Also in this area, this site is within 2 blocks of 22 transit routes, and it's in an area that's conveniently connected by bikes. It's a walkable area connected to other services and amenities as well. The applicant has also completed a draft travel demand management plan, which was included in your reports, and that plan concluded that the traffic from the proposed development would not have a significant impact on traffic operations in the area. They've also included some strategies in there, in addition to the parking that I mentioned previously, that they'd be designating a transportation coordinator, they provide real-time transit stream for the residents, and they would be charging for parking spaces. So based on these findings, staff did recommend approval of both of those applications. Most of the comments that you received today did pertain to the height and scale of the project, but I'll just go through our findings for the building setback and the PO district variance, as well as the alternative compliance request for the site plan review. So starting with that setback variance, along Central Avenue, most of the building would be within 8 feet of that front lot line. It just steps back in the north corner for a service drive entrance. This is a street that has high levels of pedestrian traffic. Our policies support wider sidewalks and landscaping, and that's what's being proposed here, where there's currently just a very narrow sidewalk and no landscape boulevard. So substantial improvements are proposed along Central. Along 2nd Street, that's where about 50% of the building would be, or first floor of the building wall, would be within 8 feet of that front lot line. But as I mentioned earlier, it's stepping back for that porte cochere and that drive parking ramp entrance. So again, here they're adding more landscaping, creating better pedestrian amenities, more bike parking. But with the access being restricted on Central, they have high volumes of traffic, and there's a transit stop at University and Central that serves 11 routes. They're looking to direct their traffic to 2nd Street where there's less conflicts. So to prevent conflicts with pedestrians, they've proposed to minimize their curb cut west, as you can see on the site plan. And then to further facilitate access between the public sidewalk and the residential entrance, they're proposing high quality materials and certain design techniques to ensure that pedestrians have adequate access to the entrance. And one other thing that was noted in these findings is that as part of the heritage preservation process, the council did find that the porte cochere would not be inconsistent with the adopted guidelines for the historic district and the comprehensive plan policy. So for that, again, we did recommend approval. Moving on to the alternative compliance request. Again, this setback of the first floor, as we just discussed, but they're also asking for alternative compliance for the active functions, and that's on 2nd Street only. They're just below the 70%, just under 69%, and comparatively, they're providing 90% active functions along Central. One other alternative proposal is they're putting windows into the bike room to meet the intent, so we're recommending alternative compliance there. They have a number of blank uninterrupted walls on the podium of the building, as well as the mechanical penthouse level. So starting on the south side of the building, in the rendering here, you can see the 2nd through 4th floors on the east side, or excuse me, 2nd through 3rd floors on the east side are not meeting that intent, but what they are proposing is to do some architectural stones there. Some have smooth surfaces, others are more textured to create an architectural effect there. Other areas where they're asking for the exception for the blank wall requirement would be on the north side, so facing the Pillsbury Library property. You can see on the left side, floors 1 through 4 need the alternative, and they've changed materials between floors, but are still exceeding 25 feet without significant architectural details. This is a part of the site that's very far away from adjacent streets. It's over 120 feet from Central, over 150 feet from University, so it's not as visible. And another thing that we noted is that adding more materials could create conflicts with the intent of the historic district, because in that district, having one primary material is appropriate. So this is in keeping with that more simplified design that would be compatible with the historic district. Let's see. Another area was on the east wall where it's facing the parking ramp, and that's only 14 feet away from that parking ramp, so it's going to have very limited visibility. Again, we're supporting alternative compliance there. And then lastly, I mentioned the mechanical penthouse level. It's inset from the lower building walls. There's also a parapet that's going to further reduce its visibility. So we thought all of these requests were within reason and were supported by staff. And there is one last request, and that would be for the general landscaping requirements, specifically the number of trees and shrubs that are required on site. The proposed amount of landscape on site is actually well over the 20% net lot area. This is at about 50%. They're also proposing to do a landscape boulevard on Central where there isn't one now. So they're providing additional trees there. And then the remainder of the landscaped area would be perennials. So we felt that this was adequate to address the intent and are recommending support there as well. Then there were two other conditions of approval recommended for the site plan review. And the first one has to do with bird safe glazing. And this is because the site is near the Mississippi River, so the thought is that the building would be in the flight zone for many migratory birds. And looking at the Pure City research, they found that the most hazardous areas within the first 60 feet, and that birds are most likely to fly into glazed facades that reflect surrounding vegetation, sky, and other features. So what we've recommended is that the applicant work with staff to identify areas on the first 60 feet of the building where bird safe glazing should be incorporated. And by bird safe glazing, what we mean is the same language that is going forward for the Skyway ordinance. But we did note that this is something that hasn't been codified yet, and it wouldn't be pertaining to buildings in general, just Skyways. So the condition as it's written is intended to be a little bit more flexible. It wouldn't necessarily require bird safe glazing in every window that falls within that first 60 feet. And the applicant has agreed with that intent. And then there was one other condition of approval, and that's just to ensure that a commercial entrance is located facing Central. They're currently proposing one now. It's just to reinforce that we would like one to be there. And then one other thing of note, you should have gotten a memo today with a correction. That would be for the site plan improvements, that it not be required to be implemented until August 29th of 2018, not last Friday. So that would be that's
all right. Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Sweezy.
Thank you. Does this building have an indoor or outdoor designated pet relief area? I can't see it if it does.
I don't recall seeing one on their amenity level. The applicant can answer that, but
Great.
That would be the amenity level, so I would assume if they have one, it would be located there.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Are there any further questions? Hearing none, at this time I'll open the public hearing on item 5. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, and please state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, President Brown. My name is Bob Lux, 201 South 11th Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota. There is a both indoor and outdoor pet relief area in the building, very similar to what we just completed at Latitude 45, which is on Washington Avenue. We did about a 4,000 square foot terraced area that is year-round for pets to relieve themselves and controlled for problems they can have in pet relief areas. So that is on off of the terrace area up on the 5th floor. Commissioners, this has been before you before, and we've met before the committee of the whole before, and I really am going to speak very briefly on this and turn it over to Gretchen Camp and Bert Coffin from ESG to talk to directly. But I want to give just a little historic background on this building and this site and why we proposed this and why we've spent a year and a half and almost 2 years going after the pursuit of this building. We believe that cities develop incrementally, but there's bold statements that have to be made at times. And I'm very serious about doing that on this project, and we have done it on other projects in downtown. that I believe that have stood the test of time over the last 15 or 20 years now. And it's a very unique site. We're very sympathetic to the conditions around the site. We worked very tirelessly with the Marcy Homes neighborhood, what we're a part of, which gave us a 12-3 vote in favor of proceeding with the building as is. And the materials that we're trying to put into this building are unmatched. I mean, the stonework that you saw around the front, that's limestone. It's the materials that we're trying to put on the ground floor and all through the podium of the building are going to be stuff that you want to make that help make a city, a world-class city like Minneapolis, where you have a walkable, sustainable community that we all want to be a part of. My wife and I live downtown. We're very much accustomed to bike riding and taking Uber and walking. And that is part of the lifestyle that we're going to be offering the residents of this building to enjoy as well. As all of you know, condominiums are very difficult to do. This is one of the few sites that we believe actually work. We understand the challenges of condominiums, the advancements that have been made over the years in mechanical systems. We're working with 3 different mechanical contractors right now to really bring into this one a state-of-the-art mechanical system from an efficiency standpoint that will be second to none, that'll be seen in the marketplace, as well as the glazing on the exterior of the building. All of those components are extraordinarily important to us, and we really do want to make this a building that 50 or 100 years from now people look back at and say, I'm very happy and excited that they did this. So with that, I'm open to questions, or we could turn it over to ESG and they can answer.
Are there any questions of the applicant? If there are none, we could have your architect speak, and please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Gretchen Camp from ESG 500 South Washington Avenue. And we had our committee of the whole meeting with you on June 30th and had a very detailed conversation with almost all of you. So I was just going to make our presentation pretty brief here. And I wanted to point out some updates to the project based on your cow comments. Some of the comments we received was basically to simplify the site design. The plans we had brought before you had a lot of things going on with the sidewalks and the hardscape design. So we've done that here. On Central Avenue, we have a right-of-way that's 16 feet wide, a boulevard that's 4.5 feet wide, a clear sidewalk that's about 5.5 feet wide, and in the summer months, we'll have some outdoor seating. As Janelle said, we have basically 100% active street front there with retail and restaurant spaces. So we basically simplified the design of the site, concentrating any hatching and change of color of the concrete to the porte cochere area to really designate that area as where vehicles are approaching. In addition, we've included bike racks in the right-of-way on Central and Second for a total of 11 bike racks with capacity for 22 bikes. Another comment at the meeting was to provide a view of through that porte cochere where we kind of take off that screen so you can kind of see what that's going to look like. As you're aware, there's a screen wall here, but this view takes that screen wall away so you can see into where the main entrance of the residence is here, where you see these 2 doors here. Really, that whole area will be very transparent, very light and open in there, and really the exterior will kind of be brought out to the interior, excuse me, will be brought out to the exterior in the ceiling and lighting and all of the high quality materials in that porte cochere area. Below that 3D view is just a flat elevation that shows beyond probably, I think, 30 or so feet beyond where you'll go into the parking here, that elevation of the main entrance, and then the more glazing. And this elevation is really at the street pulled out there. So those were the main comments we had gotten at the COW meeting, and I just wanted to point out those updates to you. And I'm available for any questions that you might have as well.
Okay, are there any questions? Commissioner Vreeland.
I also serve on the St. Anthony Falls heritage, well, I helped work on the historic district guidelines, and I serve on the St. Falls Heritage Board. The guidelines in 2012 state that new development and renovation should be done in a manner that aids in the interpretation of the history of the district. In what ways does this building contribute to the history of the district?
Commissioner Reeland, we did have a extensive approval process with the HPC, which ultimately we went through with the city council. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure if is that the purview for addressing those comments?
So you're here in front of us today, so
Right.
you kind of have to answer the question for us, not what's happened in the past. Specifically, from the St. Falls Heritage Board, we believe that the project should benefit from their location in a historically significant area, and that new projects can and should contribute to interpreting that history in a way that's appropriate to the site.
Commissioner Beeland?
What way?
I think the primary way that we dealt with it is really in the podium of the building. I mean, you can't make a 40-story tower historic in nature. And so what we did do is in the podium of the building, staff mentioned the variation of width of the textures of the limestone that we're doing. What we're really trying to do is combine the aesthetics from the library that has been supportive of our endeavors and matching that with the 1985 parking garage that sits to the east. So what we're trying to do is to blend those. The fact is that the podium of the building from the streetscape, we believe, actually fits in quite well with the surrounding area. And if it was done 70 years ago, it would actually be something that people would embrace. So we've been very, I think, thoughtful in the way that we've designed that podium of the building.
Yes, my question is, so I work on the history of this area. You are in a very special place on the planet. And in what way do you appreciate that other than blending in?
I think the respect that we've tried to give to the area, and I agree, it is one of the special places in the planet and certainly within the city of Minneapolis. By doing the highest quality product that we could put in this project in this area versus a 6-story apartment building that would be allowed in it, we've tried to deal with that with the use of materials and the quality, activating the street by putting a restaurant facility into it, and making it sustainable. Not only in the materials that we're using in the mechanical system, as I was talking about before, but even in the car areas, all of the floor plates of the parking structure are all flat floor plates, thinking that someday they might get converted into another use. So I think that what we've tried to do is to deal with it in the highest quality of ways, as any building would have a hard challenge to try to replicate what was done, 150 years ago.
I think there's some missed opportunities for historical interpretation rather than just building a good building, but I will.
Yeah, Commissioner Vreeland, we should probably move on. I don't know if there are any other questions of the applicant or the architect. It doesn't look like there are. So I think we can move on to some other testimony, just so I have a sense how many of you would like to speak on this item. So quite a few of you. I'm going to ask that we spend no more than 45 minutes on public testimony on this item. So right now it's 5:55, so we can have until 6:40 to take public testimony. So because of that, I would like to just ask you to first be mindful of not repeating things that other people have said, and also just be mindful of how much time you're taking. Keep your remarks fairly concise. So we can start. Who would like to speak first? Yes, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Commissioners, my name is Bill Griffith, representing the Neighbors for East Bank Livability. This group of neighbors has appeared at each of the hearings and has testified at each of the hearings. One thing that I would point out, and I think Commissioner Vreeland's comments are germane, because this approval references the comprehensive plan as an essential finding for the conditional use permit, all of the discussion regarding historic preservation, landmarks, and environmental impacts are appropriate to this conversation, this discussion around the conditional use permit. So I appreciate those comments early on. This group is a diverse group of residents, that 300 residents, 300 families, if you will, who live in and around the site. And they are affected by this project greatly, or they would not attend hearing after hearing after hearing. I don't think we can segregate the issues and say we decided those last month. This is about a project that's going to have a very significant long-term impact. Most of us will be gone and the building will still be standing. And so that's why it's so important to my clients who sit behind me today. The first thing I want to address is the conditional use permit. As staff stated, the conditional use permit is necessary to increase the height from 4 stories, which is allowed as a matter of right, to 42 stories. Now that statement, 4 stories to 42 stories, should give you pause, because that's a 10 times increase. Now I appreciate that staff has gone through and attempted, I will say attempted, to support that, but essentially I think it falls apart for 2 reasons. One is the height and the density are so out of scale with this neighborhood that they will leave a lasting impact on the neighborhood that cannot be reversed. Sure, it's a quality building. It's a building that the developer, by his own estimation, has spent over 2 years putting together. But we should not be lured by something shiny and pretty and of high quality to set aside the city's very clear FAR requirements and height restrictions. The building itself is 430 feet higher than the adjacent historic Pillsbury building. The building is 303 feet higher than the adjacent Winslow House, which is a condominium building. It's 40% higher than the tallest buildings on the East Bank, and those buildings were constructed before these height regulations and before the historic guidelines that were referenced by the Commissioner. The CUP is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and you have a detailed letter from our office. We cite many, many, many policies in the comprehensive plan document which this project is inconsistent with. 2 of those that I'll highlight here because time is short. The Marcy Holmes plan, which is a subset, as you know, of the comprehensive plan, calls for maximum of a high density, a very high density project of 50 to 100 dwelling units per acre. This project is 2.5 times greater than that, at 268.2 dwelling units per acre, obviously out of scale with the Marcy Holmes plan. The other one that, the other policy that I'll highlight from the comprehensive plan was highlighted by staff, but set aside in the staff report, and that's to concentrate the tallest buildings in the downtown core. This would be the 11th tallest building in Minneapolis and the tallest building outside the downtown core. The downtown core, as you know, does not have FAR limits, and that's to encourage very high-rise buildings. That's the appropriate location, not next to single-family homes and 2-story townhomes and the 1.5-story Pillsbury Library building. The textbook case, this is not a text, now I'm going to move to the variance. This is a 600% increase in the allowed FAR, floor area ratio, even considering the bonus for parking. So you go from, I think it's 2.04 to 14.02 on just the floor area ratio. You just basically give a free pass on floor area ratio. And so what does that density control mean to you? What is the purpose of that density control and the height limitation? To make sure that properties are scaled so that they don't create a negative impact on the neighborhood. And this is a special place. This is a special place. There's nothing special about this parcel other than the removal of the St. Anthony Commercial Club, which we argued against. And ultimately the city council overrode that. But the parcel itself, when you grant a variance, there has to be something unique about the property. Not just the developer's desire for density, not even the city's desire for density. A variance has to be based on special circumstances related to the parcel, not a desire just to make more money or to put higher quality finishes on a building. That is not a justification, a legal justification for a variance. And that's what we have here. And what happens when you essentially give away the city's controls, floor area ratio and height, for a quality building, is you enter into ad hocery. Now, every time a developer comes in, it's zoning by negotiation. How can you dress up this building? How can you add quality materials so we can look the other way on our own floor area ratio and height limitations? And so essentially you give away, for the bennies that can be added to the project, you give away your essential controls, which are designed to protect the neighborhood. They're not just designed to encourage good buildings, they're designed to protect what's on the ground. And that's the thing that's special about this place, is the context that you find this building in. There's nothing special about this parcel other than the long history of the commercial club, which is being removed. There's not woodlands, there's not blufflands, there's not wetlands. There's nothing here that would suggest that you need to vary your regulations in order to serve the spirit and intent of your ordinance. Finally, throughout this process, it's been remarkable to me, given the substantial variances to floor area ratio and others, and the substantial height increase, 2 times even the nearest buildings that are substantial in height. How much steam is underway behind this project? It's a little startling. The best example that I can see in a recent project is the Nyes development. That project was proposed at 29 stories. That project also had similar concerns from its nearest neighbors. And ultimately today, what's under construction is a 6-story building that's respectful of its neighbors and incorporates historic buildings into the development. That is the best kind of compromise, if you will. I mean, we don't always get to do whatever we draw on the plan, right? That is the best kind of compromise between neighborhood concerns, developer concerns, and preservation of historic buildings. That is not what we have here. What we have is an ad hoc building that doesn't fit your regulations. And if you look at the justification, look closely at the staff justification. It is to serve density. It says to serve the desired density of who? Of the developer? Of some staff? Of some politicians? Who are we serving here? Meanwhile, the historic guidelines, which means something, adopted in 2012, say 8 stories should be the height. The of right, as a matter of law height, is 4 stories, okay? We've got an FAR that is a 600% increase. What density are we serving? The Marcy Holmes plan doesn't call for this density. The only thing that the staff has put forward is a recent amendment to the comprehensive plan for an increase in some locations of density of 800 dwelling units per acre. I don't think that's even feasible anywhere in the city, but perhaps it is downtown. But if you amend a comprehensive plan, and this is my final point, if you amend a comprehensive plan, you have to implement it through zoning. You can't just say, oh, we're going to read the zoning and we're going to read the comprehensive plan and we're going to kind of mush them together and come out with a result. You must implement your comprehensive plan changes through your official controls, which are zoning. And until and unless you do that, everything else is ad hoc. And you cannot, what's going to happen to the next site, the General Mills site? Are we going to see 4 or 5 buildings of this height? How do you say no? What if they put on quality materials? Is that justification? I think not. For these reasons, we'd ask you to please turn down the CUP, the variances for this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address.
President Brown, commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this evening. My name is Dan Cohen. I live at 1215 Edlin Place in Minneapolis. I'm a member of the Great River Coalition. We wish to enhance the preservation and advancement of the riverfront and the river that it serves. I so appreciate Commissioner Vreeland's statement because it represents our beliefs that we stand at the beating heart of the greatest river system in the world, the system that provides the commercial highway for the treasures of this country to travel 1,200 miles to the sea and serve the nations of the world, the system that divides east from west and historically north from south, because it was here when Grant seized Vicksburg that he split the Confederacy, and Lincoln found the general that would win the war, dividing north from south. and east from west. Historically, its significance cannot be underestimated, not just to us, because of its also spiritual importance to the people that found it, the Native Americans, who named it Father of Waters. We have done nothing to recognize their role in this. We have done nothing to recognize the historical importance of this. We have done nothing to build the kind of icon that our sister city down the river, St. Louis, seems to have built, which doesn't even recognize the river itself. They call it the gateway to the west. But when CNN does its scan from the Statue of Liberty to San Francisco, they mention this arch in St. Louis. On one side of the river, a stop on the highway, whereas we strand this river, both sides, we are the city that marks its historical and commercial significance and its spiritual significance to the Native Americans whose role has not been recognized in this. I feel, as the previous speaker mentioned, that we set a precedent here that will lead, if it is approved, this 42-story building, if it is approved, will lead a march to this river, building after building, to destroy the essential character of the riverfront. What is needed here is an icon to reflect its importance, historical, commercial, and spiritual, and this 42-story building does not do that, and I ask you not to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Tom DuPont, and I have a business in the neighborhood at 316 East Hennepin, and I'm also the president of the Northeast Business Association, known as NEBA. And what we do there is we provide support for businesses and residents primarily in the area where this site is currently being developed. It's the area that is triangulated by Main Street along the Mississippi River, Central Avenue Northeast, which is then up to the 3rd Avenue Bridge, 1st Avenue Northeast up to the geographical point where Central and Hennepin converge. So it's kind of a small pie-shaped area. Our organization, NEBA, and its members sponsor events to promote the neighborhood and its businesses. Plus, for many years, we have dedicated ourselves to ensuring a safe neighborhood with a police situation, or excuse me, a police substation, a dedicated patrol officer, and extra beat patrols during weekends and holidays. Businesses and residents alike have supported this initiative through an annual fundraiser. This area is experiencing dramatic growth, which has included new businesses recently located in our area and substantial property development. The new businesses are Glam Doll Donuts. If you like donuts, you'll love it. Herbivorous Butcher, Lou's Sandwiches, Pinku Japanese Street Food, Riddle Room, Spitz, the STEM Wine Bar, The Bad Waitress, the Golden Pearl Vintage Shop, and Urban Violet, all great shops. I did a survey of all of these businesses, asking them why they moved to the neighborhood, and all of them responded as their number one point that it was the growth in the neighborhood that they really appreciated. So the recent developments, which includes this particular one that we're talking about tonight, includes 4 others that I won't get into. I'm sure you're very aware of what they are. The businesses feel that this dramatic growth has created opportunities for further success in the neighborhood that can be shared by businesses and residents alike. I have met with people from this organization, particularly Chris Osmundson, who's the Senior Development Associate for Elatis, and I've learned some of the specifics of the project, not all of them, not like what you guys would probably know and some of the other people. So today I'm here to lend support for this project because we believe it is a good project and will help the future growth and success of our neighborhood in all ways. So thank you for your time. Appreciate
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Dungan, and I reside at 110 Bank Street, Southeast, just nearly adjacent to this project. Reside there with my wife and young daughter, who had her first day at Marcy open today. Go Marcy Marlins, right on. So I'm here to express my support for thoughtful and well-planned density on the East Bank in opposition to the proposed 42-story lattice tower at 200 Central Avenue. While I definitely believe in the need to increase density throughout the city of Minneapolis, I'm emphatically opposed to the city's support of this project. At the appeal of the Heritage Preservation Commission recently, which was denied unanimously by the Zoning and Planning Committee, the citizens who attended and expressed their opposition to the lattice development heard the following comments from the city council members on the committee, as well as Council Member Fry. Number one, that we are living in an echo chamber and our desire to oppose the project and defend the character of the historic district was short-sighted. Number two, this is not a citywide issue because the council members had not heard from constituents outside of the immediate East Bank area. And finally, number three, that this ultra high-end development will create a, quote, trickle-down effect for other residents who want to live in this city. Point number one, are we living in an echo chamber? The city leaders of Rochester and Arden Hills would beg to differ with you, where Lattice has other proposed projects, and they've expressed deep reservations about the projects in their communities.
I am going to ask, so we do need to make sure that your remarks relate to the application, so don't stray too far from that.
Thank you.
Reminder to other speakers as well.
Well, this was germane because this was at a hearing that was related to this project. At the Rochester Planning Commission on August 24th, Lattice proposed a 13-story building, more than twice the allowable height of the city-approved 2nd Street corridor plan. While the development impressed the commission members, the crux of the decision was the building's height, just like in this project. Quote, I can't just throw away the plans as much as I like the way the project looks and all the things it does well, said Commission member Wade Gudenberger. Quote, I think there is a lot to commend about the project, said Michael Walters, commission chairman, but I have a very real problem with the height issue and the impacts. And so it went at the Arden Hills City Planning and City Council meeting. How is this not a citywide issue? When the developer is asking the city for a CUP to increase height from 4 stories to 42 stories and a variance to increase far from 2.38 to 14.42, this is a citywide issue. This is precedent setting in two ways. It is ignoring, as Commissioner Vreeland said, the 2012 St. Anthony Falls Historic Guidelines and also the city's comprehensive plan. Chapter 10.1.1 directs the city to concentrate the tallest buildings in the downtown core. The St. Anthony Falls Historic District is not the downtown core, and yet the proposal would create the 11th tallest building in the entire city, far taller than many buildings being constructed in the downtown core. And the comprehensive plan also requires new construction in historic districts to be compatible with the historic district, as Commissioner Vreeland mentioned a moment ago. If this project is allowed to go forward in its current form, the city will have the ability to ignore guidelines with any future projects in the historic district and other neighborhoods throughout the city. Finally, point three, will it really create a trickle-down effect for other residents? This rationale recalls a failed 1980s populist economic theory that favors the wealthy and the privileged. While I agree this project will definitely favor the wealthy and the privileged, I have deep reservations that it will positively benefit anyone in our city who is struggling to find affordable housing and earn a livable wage. Because this proposal is incompatible with the city's comprehensive plan and historic guidelines, and because it would cause irreparable harm to the St. Anthony Falls Historic District, I urge the Planning Commission to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Thank you very much. My name is Joel Nelson. I'm from 144 Bank Street in Minneapolis, right across the street from the Lattice site. I will be very, very brief. I timed this to 2 minutes, but I will try. And what I wanted to do is start by asking you to envision the block on which the Lattice proposal is being developed. And think of what that block will look like. There are 3 buildings will be on that block if this plan goes through. One is the Pillsbury Library, a 1-story building and an architectural icon in the city. The second thing is the St. Anthony Park parking ramp, which is empty most of the time, and I won't say anything more about that. And the third is the proposed 42 residential tower proposed here, which is, my understanding is correct. It will probably be the tallest residential building in the city of Minneapolis. If you start visualizing these structures together, what do you get? I think you get a jumble of structures, of purposes, of styles, of height. There's no plan, no vision, just a microcosm of the way the city might look. The city council, when we met here several weeks ago, said that they think that the Atlantis proposal and the historic district would work well together, but they never said how it would work well together. If all they mean by working together is that these buildings will all be on the same space, then that's not working at all. Nobody builds a Empire State Building next to the Eiffel Tower or a skyscraper next to the Taj Mahal. This is the historic district. The context of the district means everything. And it's not what goes into the podium. It's the fact that this building is 42 stories high, possibly, as I said, the highest residential building in the city. The Historic Preservation Commission report examined some of these issues, and they came out and voted against, recommended against the development of the Atlantis proposal. Nobody has mentioned that here, but that was just ignored by the people speaking for the proposal. I think the people who are against this proposal are not against the development, but they're for development of a size and density level that's more modest and more appropriate to what an historical district may mean. I hate to say this because I don't like to look at conspiracies or anything else, but I started believing, this is my last 2 sentences and then I'm gone, not forever, but gone from here, that this Atlantis building is going to have a shadow over the city if it goes forth. And the shadow will be the concern about whether there is developing in the city a partnership or an alliance between the city's desire, understandable though it may be, for property taxes and density and developers' desire for profiting from an area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Pam Kaufman, 110 Bank Street Southeast. Planning Commission members and visitors, please don't stick a Pinocchio nose on the face of my charming, historical, livable neighborhood. By allowing the 200 Central Avenue Southeast proposal, you would be putting a lie to your own carefully honed zoning rules, including increasing the allowed height from the 4 stories to 42. For the record, I enjoy living with lots of lively people, and our neighborhood is adding density at an amazing rate. But all of the other new apartment and condo buildings are reasonably and properly scaled. This one is not. I came to Minneapolis for grad school in 1968 and lived in Comstock Hall, in Dinkytown, in a goofy old efficiency in Prospect Park, and in a beautiful 1920s brick fourplex in Dinkytown. It was raised 3 years ago for a huge new apartment building. We made lifelong friends in that fourplex, and we all mourn it. I digress. Then Dennis and I moved all the way to the west side of the river to Seward, where we lived for over 35 years. We never moved to the suburbs. We never had to be lured back. Now we've retired to a condo back in Southeast, in the East Bank neighborhood. We have season tickets to the Lynx, the Timberwolves, and James Toole Ballet. I shop and bank downtown, but we don't live in downtown. We live in a neighborhood, the oldest in the whole city. Please do not stick a Pinocchio nose on the face of my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address for the
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Steve Kramer. I'm the president and CEO of the Minneapolis Downtown Council. 81 South 9th Street is my business address. 4832 11th Avenue South is my home address. I'm here to speak in favor of the project. Our organization looks at this proposal through the lens of the Intersections 2025 plan, which was published in the fall of 2011, almost 5 years ago. We've been working diligently since then to implement the 10 goals of that plan. The number one goal of which is to double the downtown residential population, and I should note that this parcel fits within the footprint of the 2025 plan for those 10 goals. Through that lens, this project hits many objectives. As others have stated, highly walkable, presents well to the street, transit friendly, but perhaps most importantly does help accomplish the goal of doubling the downtown residential population, which we think is critically important to the future economic vitality of our city, which in turn is important to the vitality of the region and the state. And it also broadens housing choice. We know that the inventory of ownership opportunities within the downtown housing market is very scarce, and this will contribute greatly to that issue. So for all of those reasons, we certainly stand in support of this project, and thank you for your attention.
Right, thank you. And please state your name and address.
My name is Dan Jacobson. I live at 110 First Avenue Northeast in the Falls Condominiums, 10th floor. And I am here tonight to say that I am for this development. My condo looks out over the proposed development at 200 Central, and I will be looking at it from the moment I wake up until the time I go to bed and go to sleep. I think it's a beautiful building. I think it's going to add a lot of vitality to Northeast Minneapolis with the 207 new tax-paying residences. I applaud Aladdis for their persistence on trying to get this proposal built and turning it into reality. I think this is going to be a signature, iconic building defining Northeast Minneapolis for years to come. And I think it's going to reflect our times, 2016 and the future. I remember when this area was a rundown, worn out, tired neighborhood. Back in 1979 when there was a rundown strip mall with a Red Owl store, what have you, and I think there was a sports bar. And it wasn't a nice place to be. I am personally thrilled, and I'm proud, and I will be proud to have 200 Central Avenue as a new neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, Dan McConnell, 3317 47th Avenue South, Minneapolis. My work address is 312 Central Avenue, directly across the street. This project will block my view of the river from my office. I'm here to speak in support of it. I believe it'll fit very well into the neighborhood. As I look out my window now, I see several towers. I don't think this will be any different than the towers that are. I won't belabor the points that the other made about building our city and building density. And I believe it'll fit very well into the neighborhood. We're going to tear down, I believe, some blighted buildings that are not historic. Hopefully it'll block out some of that hideous ramp that I have to look at. But to say that that's a historic district with that ramp in it, I do think is a stretch, but I would really appreciate the Planning Commission members supporting this project. I think it'd be a great fit for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. State your name and address.
My name is Jerry Balls. I'm currently the president of Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis. Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis does not agree with the language in the staff report for the Atlantis Tower at 200 Central Avenue. In the recommendation motion for Section D Site Review Plan Item 2 states, The applicant shall work with CPED staff to identify areas on the first 60 feet of the building where bird-safe glazing should be incorporated. Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis had agreed upon the following language with the Atlantis developers and submitted to the CPED staff. The applicant will work with the CPED to incorporate bird-safe glazing on all glass surfaces on the first 60 feet of the building. All glass surfaces in that area require bird-safe treatment. The developer has agreed to this provision. Protecting at least the first 40 feet of the building is critical to making the building bird safe, since research has shown that 70% of the bird collisions occur in this area. The bird-safe glazing and precautionary measures that Atlantis and Audubon Chapter Minneapolis have agreed to are included at the end of the staff report and should be included in the site plan review recommendations. Also included in the agreement with Atlantis is the use of commercially reasonable best efforts to incorporate bird-safe lighting in the common area, interior, and on the exterior of the entire building. This provision should be added to the site plan review recommended motion. With these commitments by the Planning Commission in the public record regarding all glass surfaces in the first 60 feet and lighting provisions for the building as specified and agreed to by Atlantis, we are opposed to the project. If these provisions are incorporated into recommendations by the Planning Commission and reflect in the public record, we are not opposed to the Atlantis Tower on the basis of bird-safe design.
All right, thank you. And please state your name and address.
My name is Steve Faber. My partners and I own the parking ramp that is adjacent to the project that has been referred to a few times here this evening. We are in support of the project. I think it is historic. I think it is a historic project, and I hope that you will make the bold initiative to support it. It's a project that's iconic. I think over history, as we've built buildings, I don't think that we've built buildings over the last 150 years to look like the buildings that were there before. I think there are numerous examples in communities where iconic new architectural design and structure has been built. I think this building will be a catalyst for the neighborhood. A friend of mine called his realtor not too long ago, and they wanted to find a $300,000 to $600,000 condominium with views of the river. They gave the realtor 3 weekends that they were available. Took 1 day. They had 4 projects to look at. This is a wonderful neighborhood, and this project will allow a couple hundred other people to enjoy this neighborhood and to be part of the neighborhood and to be part of the river and all the positive things that we have going on here in Minneapolis. As far as trickle down, we're spending a couple $1 million on our ramp. We're redoing the membrane. We've redone the elevators. Take a look at them. They're pretty neat with the panels that show some pictures of the river bridges and things like that. New lighting's going in, and most of the exterior work, the landscaping and the signing is yet to be done. But this project will provide a catalyst for that neighborhood that we can't even at this point in time imagine or figure, but it will. I think codes and rules and laws and things, we have to put those in place. But there are times when there are special projects that come along that we need to look at those, and I applaud you for looking at that and making the changes and supporting the project or the support that's come out of the city to date. I think we need to look at affordable housing in the neighborhood as well. I think we need to look at senior housing in the neighborhood. There are a number of people that would like to stay in the neighborhood and move out of their homes and have senior housing as well. But I am in full support of this project, and I welcome the day when I can look at it and see it there in the skyline. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Steve Greenfield, 3429 Girard Avenue South. I'm on the board of the Friends of Roberts Bird Sanctuary, one of the groups that have been meeting about this in terms of the danger to particularly to migrating birds. I'm also a member of the Audubon chapter that Derry spoke for. Just for a little background and context, at the Zoning and Planning Committee meeting, 4 people spoke, stating basically that if this project is to be built, there needs to be steps taken to ameliorate the danger to birds. And we're very close to an agreement to remove those objections, but it needs another step that you can take. Just briefly, we met with Committee Chair Bender and planning people to discuss this first. We were referred to talk to Council Member Fry because it's his district, a very supportive discussion, and he had us talk directly to Alatus staff. That discussion went very well. Their proposal is not what we'd ideally have in every building, but really met most of the objections, and they support it. The problem is just that the statement in the report that was handed to you does not reflect that. It says that it will be discussed further what to do with this lower section of glass, and that is not acceptable. And the irony is that Alatus agrees with the statement that Jerry Balls read. All the lower 60 feet, and something needs to be done to take care of the lighting danger. The situation is, you know better than I, that wording like that in my talking about these discussions are going to be worth nothing a few years from now. There needs to be some commitment. Now, you know better than I how that could be implemented. I think it should be in the conditions of approval, but you know other methods. But basically, this same statement that Alatus agrees with, to not have that in there would be just ruining the intent of us following that whole process. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Bender, do you have a question for the speaker? I think the last speaker, I think Commissioner Bender has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to quickly note that if the folks who are here on the bird safe glass issue have specific language that's very important to have in conditions, it would be very helpful to have that language sooner than later, and then I'll go ahead and ask the
it's appended to the report,
project
but
team.
we can make sure.
Okay, so if you could just point. Okay.
Right, thank you. We can move on to the next.
Just to clarify, if folks want us to add a condition of approval, it would be helpful to have the specific wording that would be most amenable to those folks, and when in the next 10 to 15 minutes as we continue with the public hearing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Steve Yanish. I live at 100 2nd Street Northeast, which is the Village Lofts just upriver from the proposed site. I'm here to speak in favor of the project, and I'll address two issues, density and height. I've lived in my building, original purchaser in 2003. Before that, I lived in Lorraine Green East, which is in 12th and LaSalle. I bring your attention to that building because prior to that construction, Loring Park was 3-story, 4-story buildings. Those two buildings got done at 25 stories, and I think significantly improved and changed the direction of that neighborhood, as I believe this project will. And secondly, I'd like to speak to marketability, or what the market is doing. I live on the 6th floor of my building. Last month, the person who lives immediately below me on the 5th floor put his unit up for sale. It sold in 1 hour at 100% of the market rate, and he had 36 people wanting to see it. There's a tremendous demand that's been pent up, and I think this project would help solve that problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And please state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Chris Coy, and I live at 419 5th Street Southeast. Every summer I have a long list of projects to get done, and I think we'd all agree that it seems like the shortest season is summer. This summer I was hoping to replace my backyard fence. In preparation, I checked out the city Minneapolis' website and found a straightforward list of the city's rules and regulations regarding fences. The purpose of these fence requirements is, and I quote, standards governing fences are established to promote the public health, safety, and welfare, encourage an aesthetic environment, and allow for privacy while maintaining access to light and air. There's a lot of what I would describe as the public good tied up in that sense of purpose. All those considerations just for a fence. Though I haven't looked through all the zoning and planning regulations relating to the building of a 42-story tower, I have to think that they too have a purpose, that they exist in part to protect the public good against private interests like a lattice. According to the city, the maximum height of a fence depends on its location. My backyard fence, it says, shall not exceed 6 feet in height. There is, however, a variance allowed. If the entire fence is constructed of open fencing material, I could increase the height by 2 feet. So why all this talk of fences? I imagine if I came before this commission asking you to allow me to build a fence 10 times the height allowed, imagine a fence between 60 and 80 feet tall, you'd never allow it. And yet that is exactly what you were considering here today. Lattice is asking you to grant a conditional use permit to increase the height of their proposed building from 4 stories to 42 stories. I don't think any reasonable person would consider a building 10 times taller than is allowed in the historic district a variance from the rules and regulations. If an 80-foot fence is ridiculous, then why isn't this completely out of scale tower equally absurd? Should you choose to approve this 42-story tower, You will establish a precedent that is detrimental to the future livability of this entire city. You will also render your own authority moot, meaningless, and reinforce the belief of many in Minneapolis that this city is run for the developers and by the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. And please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
My name is George Carlson, and I live at LaRive, which is 110 Bank Street Southeast, and a lot of the other people who have spoke against this building also live at LaRive, a 28-story building at 110 Bank Street Southeast. I'm going to address three things. I'm in favor of the building. I guess I better say that. I'm going to address three things. The historic fabric of this area in the St. Anthony Falls Historic Guides is gone. It's not there anymore. That's what the guideline says, that the historic guideline has been destroyed or it's gone or something like that. The only thing on this particular block is the Pillsbury Library, which, according to Mr. Lux, is working with the developer, and they approved the development. The other thing on the block is the parking ramp, which I'm glad to hear is being upgraded, but it's still a parking ramp, and it's a 9-story parking ramp. It's nothing historic, nothing like that at all. The rest of the historic buildings for the next 3 or 4 blocks is basically parking lots. Furthermore, on the St. Anthony Historic Guidelines, they don't talk about the total height of a building. They say that the guidelines say that the building, the pedestal of the building has to face the street, and that's what counts with reinforcing the historic identity of the building, or the fact that it won't clash with the historic identity. No, this has got a 4 or 5-story pedestal, and then we've got the tower. And in the historic guidelines, if you look at the historic guidelines and look at the pictures in there, they show all kinds of buildings that are 10, 12, 15 stories tall with pedestals, and that's all they focus on. And they specifically, in the verbiage in there, they talk about focusing on the lower few feet, which is the street level. Secondly, the view and the size of the building. The building is 40 stories high with something else on the top. LaRive is 27 from Bank Street. We say it's 28 because we don't have a 13th floor. It's 29 from Main Street. And it's much wider than this building, though, and it blocks a good view of downtown from over on University where Lunds is. And it's because it's wide, it really blocks a lot of the view. This building is going to be much narrower, and according to the staff report, it doesn't block any significant view corridors. And then the third thing about the size of the building is most people are going to see the building from the 3rd Avenue Bridge. They're going to see the building driving out of downtown Minneapolis. And what they'll see then, they'll see LaRive, which is much closer, just like the fish in a photograph. When you hold the fish out in front, it looks really big. They'll see LaRive, which is much closer to the river, much closer to the bridge, and they'll see the 40-story Atlantis project, which is further away, and they don't look all that much out of difference. Obviously, the Atlantis building looks a little taller, but it doesn't look way out of scale. It looks pretty much the same. If they're up close to the building, wandering around Shute Park or over at Lunds or whatever, you don't look at the tops of the buildings. You're just walking around. I never look at the top of LaRive when I'm in the neighborhood. So the height of the building doesn't make all that much difference. What you're looking at is the 10 or 15 stories that you can see without looking like that. And that reminds me of a story. I was downtown at the Holly Dazzle, and a little kid looked up at the, I think it's now called the RCB building, and he looks up, "Mommy, Daddy, look, a skyscraper." Well, that was like a 30-story building, and you don't notice that. The little kid thought he really spotted something. Well, people in the neighborhood aren't going to notice it either. They're not going to walk around and say, "Wow, that's too big." The main time that they'll see it and standing there is when they're coming across the bridge or from across the river. And then since it's further away from the river, it just doesn't look that much bigger than LaRive. And then I got one question. You might ask some of the people who are against it. They claim to have 300 residents on their side or for it. I think what they got is 300 people who signed the request for the EAW. And the request for the EAW had a lot of horror scenarios, what might go wrong and so on and so forth. They didn't have any evidence that's required by the EAW statute, so it was dismissed. And I wonder, I just don't think all those people, or even maybe half of them, would sign as being against this building if they hadn't been kind of goaded into it by what was stated in the request for the EAW. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And it's 6:41. We do have some people who want to speak, so I'm fine extending the period. Aside from the people currently in line, is there anyone else who would like to speak? At least one person. That's fine. I'll extend it for another 15 minutes, so about 6:55. I will continue to ask that you keep your remarks fairly concise and not repeat. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the height of the building. We've heard about the impact on the riverfront, bird-safe glazing. We've heard some arguments in support of the project, adding to housing choice and supporting business growth. So just be keeping that in mind. And please state your name.
My name is Eric Wunderlich. I live at 413 5th Street Southeast in the Marcy Homes neighborhood. That's in the 5th Street Southeast Historic District. I live in a historic house. I moved to the neighborhood for its historic character and its in relation to the river. When I look out my front window, I see the tops of the elevators down on Main Street, and I see downtown Minneapolis on the other side of the river. I don't live in downtown Minneapolis. That's the other side of the river. This is not in downtown Minneapolis, so I want to be really clear about that. This building, this proposal, is an affront to the historic district, to the Marcy Homes neighborhood, to the character of the area, to the birthplace of the city of Minneapolis. And as our elected officials, and those of you who are appointed by our elected officials to this commission, it's your duty to review and then approve or reject development proposals against a background of the city's planning policies and guidelines that we as citizens have agreed to be governed under and to collectively abide by. In this particular case, we have a developer that is asking for variances and conditions that represent such an extreme overreach that to even consider them as conditions or variances within the framework of the city's zoning and planning rules and guidelines is obscene. In fact, if you choose to ignore the planning guidelines and approve these requests, you will have essentially abdicated your responsibility to the citizens of Minneapolis and by your actions ceded control of the planning process to the developer. Approving the lattice requests would cause great harm to the city and to the democratic process. To approve these requests would be the height of your responsibility. As a participating citizen of the city of Minneapolis, I ask that you support responsible development policies and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address.
My name is Constance Pepin, and I live at 4031 Zenith Avenue South, in the south part of the city. I urge you to reject the proposal. You know, there really should be laws against a proposal like this in this location. And there are laws against a project like this in this location. And you have to listen to those laws. This location is not part of the downtown core. So all the arguments about that don't matter. This area is not in decline, so arguments about revitalizing the area are irrelevant. It's already revitalizing and growing. Further, quite the opposite of what the staff report says, you can approve this project only if you ignore the comprehensive plan, the heritage or historic preservation guidelines, and zoning laws, our own zoning laws. The staff report contains many errors. In fact, the proposal does not meet the requirement for the conditional use permit or the variances requested. It does not meet those. Simply saying something doesn't make it true. I can stand here and say, I'm 35 years old, and that doesn't make it true. The things in the staff report are false. It does not meet the criteria for a conditional use permit or for these variances. Yet that is what the staff report does. In claiming to meet the conditions for approval, it just writes it in there that it meets it. And you don't believe it. You have to take a closer look at this and not approve it because it's a wow building or a bold building. It doesn't matter. You still have to follow the comprehensive plan and the heritage preservation guidelines. Why did we bother to have those passed in 2012? The staff report is inaccurate in stating that the height of this project will not be injurious. The buildings cited in the staff report as being of comparable height are not of comparable height. They're not. And They were built before these guidelines were put into effect. So why did we spend taxpayer money on making these guidelines if you were just going to push them out and overrule them and let a developer overreach like this just because the council member in the district approves of it and wants it to happen so that he can make his own history and advance his own political career? This project would be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity. And by ignoring existing regulations, it will definitely impede the normal and orderly development and improvement not only of surrounding properties, but throughout the entire city. Every neighborhood would be affected by this. The only thing worse than the egregiously inaccurate staff report would be for you to use this report today to approve this building. Please don't rubber stamp this one. Please don't rubber stamp this one. Too much is at stake. Your approval of this project will violate the spirit and the letter of our own laws and put the city and neighborhoods at risk by setting a dangerous precedent. If you blatantly disregard our laws, other developers will expect the same favor that you're willing to give this person and put the city at risk for endless lawsuits unless every future project is also exempted from our regulatory framework. And sadly, I've been to enough of these hearings that I know that people have already rehearsed what they're going to say, and I can already see it coming. Really, unfortunately, it gets very boring and very discouraging and very demoralizing. And I'm really sad that that's probably what's about to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Joanne Netlin, 110 Bank Street. This is difficult as we have no idea if our comments this afternoon have any meaning at this point. It was so sad to go to one of these meetings to see at least 15 people from a Bryant neighborhood speak. I don't recall if it was your group or another group, but it was apparent that the members had already made up their minds. They'd reached their decisions. You people seem attentive. You've been listening to the speakers. I really applaud you. I just hope you still have an open mind and have not reached decisions yet. We're hearing many reasons to oppose Atlantis's unreasonable applications because they blatantly go against the process. Larkin Hoffman has submitted to you 13 pages of arguments. The zoning code is 4 stories. This morning, I looked at building heights of current downtown Minneapolis residential projects and was astonished. Most of the buildings, and you know them all, they're 6 and 7 stories tall. Now, there are some exceptions. Mortenson U.S. Bank will be 28. Superior Plating is 21. Opus Apartment Tower near the library downtown, 30 stories. So why are we still discussing 42 stories in the St. Anthony Historic District? It doesn't make sense. Why are we still talking about it when so many people agree that this is outlandish for this sensitive, unique neighborhood? Also eye-opening are the problems Lattice is having trying to gain approval for 13 stories in Rochester. T&Z failed to approve that. Lattice wants 12-story residential in Arden Hills. This met a lot of resistance from the city council. It's all been in the press the past couple of weeks. These city governments oppose Lattice building heights. Where is the support from Minneapolis to protect our historic neighborhood from a 42-story monstrosity? We implore you to keep the skyscrapers on the other side of the river. Do not allow downtown to spread across to the historic district, please. It would open the floodgates for out-of-control building heights, totally changing the historic character of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. And please state your name and address.
Yes, I'm Edna Brasitis, and I'm here today for Preserve Minneapolis, and I live at 4 Grove Street. And I think we're going back again to fences and the 1999 zoning code changes. In 1999, the zoning code was amended to add maximum heights. Before that, there was no maximum heights. You controlled buildings in a different manner. But after that point, every zoning classification had a height assigned to it. It sort of guided development, and both the people who own the property, the neighbors, the developers had some idea what is to be expected. Janelle has said that actually increasing the height is a substantial deviation. It's pretty substantial, all right? And if you think of driving, if there's a speed limit and it says 64 miles an hour and that's the maximum speed, I might be able to push it. Tell the officer I'm following traffic, or maybe I'm late for a meeting, or my mother's in the hospital. If I'm really desperate and I've gone too far, my child's been mauled by a bear. But if I'm going 420 miles an hour, I'm going to end up in jail. That is really out of line. And so what I'm kind of worried is, and what Preserve Minneapolis is worried about, is we're just abdicating those rules. We're so far out of line. And we're worried about the precedent. When I was sitting down over there, Steve Kramer talked to another person. He said, what about Nicollet Island? So is Nicollet Island going to be open there's no limits on that any longer? How about the really cute and adorable Pillsbury Library? It's an old building. Couldn't it be more valuable if it was developed more densely? So I just don't think, I really love you guys on the Planning Commission. I think you're great. But I don't know if that's your job, is to decide whether or not you should abdicate the zoning code. That's what Lisa Bendier and the big guys who are elected to do. So if they decide they'd like to go back and not have any limit on height, they can go do that. If they want to get rid of the historic district, they can do it. But we don't think it's the right way to do it piecemeal. We want to do it in an organized way where everybody knows what the rules are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Victor Gramsch. I live at 132 Bank Street Southeast, just about 50 feet from the Lattice Tower, and I do support the project. I would like to just one of the things I'd like is data. I guess you can't see that. I'll just tell you is data, and it's worth pointing out that many of the people who oppose this project worry about density. Sorry.
We could see it if you want to use it as a visual.
And it's worth pointing out that the densest building in the, what are we doing here? Oh, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Give it to me. Is it the densest?
90 degrees. Thank you.
I've highlighted the densest building in the neighborhood is Larive at 331,000 dwelling units per square mile, which is how you would want to standardize these things. And Lattice is less than that. So that the argument, and if you look at some of these others, that we have several buildings over 200,000 dwelling units per square mile in the already built, and some of the newer buildings like Mortensen and even the new Nyes, Montage, is over 177,000 dwelling units per acre. So density, if you measure it in a numeric way, we already have it, and it works wonderfully in the neighborhood. It's not going to cause a neighborhood to be degraded in any way. Second thing I would just like to point out to Commissioner Freeland's comments. One of the things about this neighborhood that there's tend to focus on the buildings, when in fact the heritage of this neighborhood is commerce. This was a big commercial district, and that if you look at the historic records of things, that the typical building was 2 stories tall with public uses, be it office, be it store, something on the ground floor. And you can imagine the podium of this building, a couple of doughboys coming back, having survived the trenches in World War II, picking up some architectural ideas in Paris and saying, we're going to do some avant-garde stuff in 1920. And they could have done that. They could have built this building. The materials are what they might have done, limestone. It's mixed use. It doesn't pose any difficulties in their technology. It's only 4 stories. In those days, people gladly walked upstairs. You didn't need elevators. So that this building actually acknowledges I think the important characteristic of the area, the commerce, the fact that it was a commercial district, in a way that, say, for example, Larive or Winslow House or Pinnacle and Falls, which are actually built as fortresses to deny the city, the sidewalk, don't do. So I think this building is actually the first step along here in restoring a significant character of the neighborhood. That is that it was commercial. And the last thing I would just like to say is that we have a comprehensive plan for sustainable growth. And one of the things that's about this project is it'll bring 450 new residents to the city of Minneapolis. And we all know that population growth is an important issue. But also it will bring 400 new customers to the 1,000 buses that cross the East Bank every day. It'll bring to the various businesses as well. But also, I think that we also have an issue about sustainability, and that's partly the lifestyle that people can walk which is the most sustainable, like I did coming over here. And the other thing is that this uses the best available technology for a building. So the building, it may not meet the zero emission standard that Minneapolis would like to have, but it comes a lot closer than the 6-story stick construction using power packs does. And that these kinds of buildings are expensive technology to install, but it is the long run to have buildings that are fundamentally, by design, more efficient, more environmentally friendly than the kinds of buildings we're building now in other places, especially the 6-story buildings that are littering the cityscape. And I might note that while we should remember and I think acknowledge the past, I don't think we should live there, and that they didn't have to worry about environmental issues in those days except to denigrate them. And I think that we have to bring our buildings up to date, and we have to basically make them fit with our modern and future requirements, and not be so wound up on all the details of the buildings. So again, I urge you to approve the building. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And please state your name and address for the record.
Commissioners, my name is Chris Osmondson. I'm with Alatus. I'm obviously in favor of the project, but I'm up here to clarify some previous discussions relating to the bird safe glazing. There was an email submitted in the package that was received by all of you, I believe, from Jerry Balls to Janelle Widmeyer that has the specific language that we would propose incorporating into the conditions of approval. And I can read the page-long document, or I could hand it to you if you guys would like to submit that.
If you don't mind, maybe handing it to the clerk.
Yeah, that's probably.
We can have that for reference.
I did also want to mention, just to piggyback on Victor's comments, this is a fully LEED certified building, so we are building this to sort of the most accredited technologies that you can get to at this time and place. And while it's not net zero, that's a very tough policy to incorporate into for sale residential units. So with that, are there any questions about the bird safe conditions?
Commissioner Bender, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have the language on page 89 of our packet. So my question was, I think the language would need to be tweaked just a small amount at least to be more consistent with how we pass conditions of approval, but
sure,
it's also very detailed. So I just wanted to make sure that the details were correctly captured and hear from you if you are okay with this, particularly these items 2 and 3 and 4.
Yep. So we took basically with the exception of the 60 feet instead of 40 from the Skyway proposal. So we bumped that up, and that's where the language from conditions 1, 2, and 3 comes from. And then in addition, the 4th protocol, I guess, in that language deals with operations going forward. So your uplighting and any retail lighting and things like that.
Okay, great. And I'm assuming that since it was submitted by the folks here to speak about bird safe laws, if they're okay with this too, but just wanted to make sure before that part comes. So.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And please state your name and address.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Dale Herron. I lived on the East Bank for 19 years, and I currently reside at the Monster Building at 110 Bank Street. I'm not going to delve into the many reasons I oppose this development. Other people have said that a lot better here tonight, but I've been on record with that. However, I would ask that the Commissioners during your deliberations consider 2 questions. I'd like you to review whether the proposed development sets a precedent for the East Bank, as well as all areas of the city outside the downtown core. Are you setting precedent in your vote tonight? Number 2, please tell us, at least generally, what you consider as acceptable for allowing variances under the current regulatory structure. For example, do you have other examples the Commission can point to in which such large changes are being made for a single-use development in an historic district? Have we done this before? Have we done anything like this before? Thank you in advance for any light you can shed on these 2 topics during your deliberations.
All right, thank you. And one more speaker. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Dale Zorb, and I live in New Brighton. I do own two properties in northeast Minneapolis, not adjacent, one at 1501 Johnson Street and one at 2811 Broadway. I'm concerned about how the building fits in with the historic fabric of the neighborhood. And frankly, I think Gladys had done a wonderful job on the podium of this building to make it fit into the neighborhood. The selection of materials and the coloration of the materials, particularly in the podium, I think are a very nice blend to the neighborhood and will not detract from it. The tower, glass and sheet metal, glass is a little cold, and the black and the sheet metal, I don't particularly care for. Maybe you could ask him to change the color, but on second thought, the concept of the council demanding developer to change color, I don't care for that worse. So I guess I could go with what they've got. There's been much said tonight about whether or not this is groundbreaking and whether it's going to change the fabric of the neighborhood. I don't think so. I think there is there are a lot of people who are aging and want to move back to the city. I think Minneapolis supports that. And certainly this is inevitable. The growth is going to expand out from the city. So what's happening with this particular development isn't going to be the first, isn't going to be the last. And I think the objections tonight about having a limit of 4 stories that has been voiced by so many who live in 26 to 30-story buildings, but want to focus on the fact that this should only be 4 stories. Well, you have to think about that. And I guess the reason that you're here is because you make allowances and provide conditional use permits for properties. If you didn't make special conditions for certain buildings, then you would have no purpose here and we would just go by the city code. So I would support this project. And that is the end of the discussion.
All right, thank you. We're past our time limit, but is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have 4 applications in front of us. Conditional use permit for height, 2 variances, and a site plan review. Commissioner Magrino and then Commissioner Bender.
Yeah, I'm wondering if either the applicant or staff, kind of whoever wants to, can explain a little bit more about the FAR variance and how specifically that would meet the ordinance. I mean, what are the practical difficulties involved and what are the circumstances unique to the site, specifically the first finding there?
All right, yes, go ahead.
Commissioners, I'm Carol Lansing, Fakery Baker Daniels, working with the Lattice. And to your question about how the FAR variance meets the required findings. Variances are a mechanism to give relief from the literal requirements of the ordinance. And they exist because it's fundamentally understood that you aren't going to have a zoning ordinance that is going to be able to anticipate every fine-grained set of circumstances for particular parcels and locations. Variances are authorized by statute, and I kind of want to give this background because what I think is important about the statute is that the first key thing it says is that they shall only be permitted where they are in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinances and when the variances are consistent with the comprehensive plan. So what the staff report findings hinge on, and you have seen this in other developments, is that when there is inconsistency between the city's comprehensive plan goals for density and activity centers, near growth centers, and transit corridors near commercial, when you find those inconsistencies of those goals, in this case for density, with a zoning district that is kind of common throughout the city in a particular location, that is practical difficulties in complying with the intent of the ordinances, which include consistency with comprehensive plan goals here. And so in this site, you have a C2 district. Even if it was C3A, the heights limit and the FAR would still be in the 2 range. And this is not, what's unique about this site. Doesn't have to be singular. Unique circumstances don't mean it's the only place this can happen. But it is unique that in this set of circumstances of land use and parcel characteristics, it is different than every other C2 site in the city. This isn't going to be precedent for every site that's zone C2 or guided mixed use. I don't know if that got to your question, but those practical difficulties focus mainly on mismatch of goals and circumstances and ordinance, and also then looking at character of the area. It is, as staff has indicated, consistent with the character of this area.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are obviously a lot of big issues here. On this bird safe glass question, though, I wanted to ask staff to comment, just again to give us all time to consider the options here. This is the language I'm glad to hear is agreed upon by the folks who've talked about this. This is very specific, and so I just want to understand if this is incorporated as it is here in front of us into a condition of approval, what that does down the road in case there's some change. I'm remembering a few changes recently to building materials that there was some question, would that require the entire project to come back through the Planning Commission with a whole new set of land use applications for approval? So I'm just a little concerned with the level of specificity here and what that means for this project going down the road, not wanting to diminish any commitment to the bird safe glass question. I'm actually really glad to see this happening and want to think about how this would kind of continue on with discussions about bird safe glass across the city. But again, just understanding this project and some of these recent examples of projects needing to come back through our whole process for approval.
Certainly. The email I'm looking at is the one dated August 23rd. And what I'm understanding is what would be incorporated would essentially be adding on to what we've recommended as a starter and then listing those 4 items in addition to that. Because I was just reading, one part of it is worded slightly different than what staff has recommended. So we use the term should be incorporated on the building walls, looking for where it should be incorporated. And then the wording here is that bird safe glazing on all glass surfaces on the first 60 feet of the building. We'll look at working on incorporating those. So slightly different, but yeah, those 4 points listed, I don't see any issues with including that. Maybe clarifying if it's going to be the staff recommended language that starts it out or what's listed in this email.
And again, just in the spirit of understanding, appeals that may come or things that may change in the future, I just do, again, want to give the applicant an opportunity to say, like, are the things in these 4 points that are very detailed things that you think are easy to incorporate into the project that are supported or not? Just again, for my information, not that we would decide yes or no.
Give a response for that.
I'm Chris Osmondson with the applicant. So as Jerry had mentioned, we sat down and had a pretty in-depth discussion about where especially items 1, 2, and 3 originated from, how that was created, and we've looked at some different scrims and laminates and believe that we can incorporate that with respects to exactly, I guess I think we're both still working through it a little bit, so I wouldn't anticipate that if we had some sort of modification that needed to be made, we would have to come back through this process, but that's really for your interpretation of how the language would be drafted. It's our intent, though, to make this work, and that's what we had sort of agreed to, and the reason why Ms. Widmeyer's sort of comments were more flexible was that we sort of knew that this was what this might run into with having the specificity that was in that email.
All right. Thank you. Commissioners, are there any further questions, or would someone like to start off the discussion with a motion? 4 applications before us. Commissioner Slack.
Well, I will start the conversation. I'll move item A, conditional use permit, per staff recommendation.
All right. Is there a second? Motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit. Is there a second? Commissioner Rockwell has seconded it, so we have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit. Commissioner Slack, would you like to?
So yeah, I'll just
elaborate on
briefly
that?
speak to that. First off, I want to thank everybody who came out to testify tonight. We heard a lot of great feedback, a lot of great conversation, a lot of well thought through and thoughtful comments. I personally will say that I hardly ever come to these meetings with a final decision made, because testimony is important, and the individuals that are directly impacted by a development like this should have a say in ultimately what happens in their neighborhoods and communities. With that, we do have a certain purview of how we can review projects. I will personally also say that I have issues with the height of this project. I have issues with certain aspects of the design of this project, and these are all things that we talked about as part of the committee of the whole meeting at the last meeting, where the applicants came in and presented this project. With that, we do have adopted city policies, and the one that I point to that relates to every one of these applications is the fact that we allow up to 800 density units an acre on this parcel based on adopted city policy. So no matter how personally I have issues with height, this policy goes against that, because to allow and maintain and provide for 800 density units acre on a site means that you have to have a taller building, means that the floor area ratio has to be increased, which ultimately means that in my purview, how I read the comprehensive plan, this is allowable. So that's why, even though I do have some issues with the project, I will be voting in favor.
Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also will support the motion for the conditional use permit. I do very much, though, take to heart the comments about needing to have our plans have a greater level of specificity and predictability. I think I would say that I think I've heard that from multiple stakeholders as in my time on the Planning Commission and as zoning and planning chair, that's equally shared by community members and neighborhoods across the city, as well as folks who are developing land in the city, a desire and need for more consistency and more predictability in where we want to see buildings of certain sizes or not. And so I have great hope that our comprehensive plan update and what I think should be a subsequent update of our zoning code, which is a pretty significant overhaul of our zoning code, will start to address that. And then from there, I actually think we need to do corridor plans for corridors like Central Avenue. In the absence of those kinds of design guidelines that I think we need, we do our best with the policies that we have, and I agree with the staff recommendations in the report on this particular motion. I think that we look at the context of the area as an important guide, and while it is in a historic district, it also has a very rich variety of buildings here, including the relatively tall parking ramp immediately adjacent, as well as several taller buildings. So I don't think it's actually very accurate to suggest that we only have tall buildings in downtown, or that our policies suggest that we only should. So again, that's my reasoning for supporting the conditional use permit to increase the height for this project.
Commissioner Rockwell.
Thank you. I will also be voting for this motion, and I think I wanted to reflect on a couple comments that were made. I agree with what the past my fellow commissioners have said. I think there's an issue with the consistency of our comprehensive plan and our zoning code, and both attorneys who spoke today on either side of the issues addressed that as well. And I think it is a basis, the basis for granting a variance. And I know there's a feeling that you cannot rely on a comprehensive plan, and you need zoning, but that was a state law that was repealed in '97. And so that is in fact not the law. And so we need to take into account our comprehensive plan, and it's called for in all of our regulations here. And it's been a focus in this room, and I think it's an issue that there are two different ways of reading the comprehensive plan, and that may be the case with every comprehensive plan, but it certainly is with this. And so defining consistency with the plan is hard and it is probably subjective. I think that the way we balance that is we look at the not only at the consistency with the plan, but the consistency with the area. And this is a historic area, but it is a center of commerce, as the speaker pointed out. And it is the historic center of commerce for a city. And I think part of what we call for, even in the first land use policy in the comprehensive plan 1.1, the city is charged with seeking the highest development standards. And we heard from several people opposed to this project that we should not allow this because it's just because it's high quality or because it's a wow building. We heard that most of us would be gone when the building's still standing. I think those are actually all things that we do have to consider. That the building is built strongly and sustainably is a positive for our city, and that it is a block and a quarter plus a bridge from downtown Minneapolis, the indisputable downtown Minneapolis, I think is also important. So this is not about building a C2 building, a 40-story C2 building anywhere in the city. This is has context here. There's transit coming. There's already a lot of high-frequency transit here, and we need density to support that. And there's a commercial district. We need density to support that. So that's in part why I'm voting for this.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bender?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
Freeland?
No.
So that is 6-1.
All right, and that motion carries. We have 3 more applications before us. Commissioner Slack, would you like to take a stab at another motion?
I move staff recommendation for item B, variance to increase maximum floor area ratio, and item C, variance of the PO pedestrian overlay district standards.
All right, is there a second? We have a motion and a second to approve items B and C, the variances to increase the maximum floor area ratio and the variance of the pedestrian-oriented overlay standards. Commissioner Magrino.
I'm kind of wondering if we could split those up, potentially. I don't know if anyone else has a desire to do that, or
We can. I think maybe Commissioner Slack, if you want to withdraw your initial motion.
I will withdraw that motion, and I will make a motion to approve item B, variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item B, the variance to increase maximum floor area ratio. And Commissioner Magrino.
yeah. And I actually, so I want to start with saying that I think that the project is fantastic. It obviously is a lovely looking building. That's exactly the kind of thing that we should be putting in this location in middle of a major American city in 2016. That being said, I really don't feel that the zoning in this location supports the FAR variance request here. We on a pretty regular basis will grant a minor FAR variance request, but as I think a lot of people said, the 600% increase is kind of a lot, and it really, to me, it sort of calls into question the whole point of having a zoning code. I definitely would say that our zoning code has a lot of problems. Like I said, I think that this project should be here, but I question putting it in the C2 district. We have had a lot of problems with conflicts with the comprehensive plan and with small area plans and our zoning code, and we've generally sided with the zoning. So sort of in the reverse situation, if we have a small area plan that says that we might like 3 to 4 story buildings here, but the underlying zoning says that something higher is allowed or a different FAR is allowed. We've gone with what the zoning said, saying that that was the regulation that we were supposed to follow. So I'm disappointed to say that I don't support the motion, but in this case, I don't think that I can. I think if people at a higher level want these kinds of projects to get built, and I do, I think that we should really work on reforming our zoning code. Just a couple of blocks from here, a month ago, I unfortunately missed the meeting, but we approved a White Castle and a Holiday gas station on a whole block in a booming area, and we keep running into these issues over and over again. So I don't have a problem with the height. I don't see this as a historical issue that's kind of been resolved already by the city council, but in this case, the FAR variance, I don't think is something that I will be able to support.
Thank you. And I'll just add, obviously the height of the building and the concern about the magnitude of that variance was a major theme of some of the comments that we heard, and I think all certainly don't take those comments lightly. However, I'm supportive of the variance in this location, and I do believe there is a practical difficulty with complying with the code in that our comprehensive plan does pretty clearly state that very high density development is acceptable in activity centers that are adjacent to growth centers, which that is the case for this location. And the Marcy Homes neighborhood plan, which also addresses this location, also supports high density development. And on a smaller site like this, it's very difficult to get to a density anywhere near that very high or 800 units per acre without any sort of variance. And I also believe that the project is well designed. The podium of the building is well designed and I think fits in well with the historic character of the area. The tower is limited to a portion of the site, and really having a taller building, and I realize it's taller than any other building in this general area, is the trade-off for having a more boxy residential building, which we've seen a lot of lately. So this is something that's a little bit of a change from that, and I think it'll be a good deviation, and I'm supportive of that variance. Is there Commissioner Rockwell? Did you have
just very briefly for the purposes of establishing the findings on the record? I agree, and I think I acknowledge the 800 per acre is a may and is very contextual, but it is allowed, and the comprehensive plan calls explicitly for densities up to 200 units per acre. This is 268 or something like that. I have a feeling that the 30-something story building allowed at the 200 would raise many of the same objections that we heard tonight from the community, and that is explicitly expected. And then we have this contextual allowed up to 800. And as I stated earlier, I think the context here, if it doesn't make sense here, a block from downtown Minneapolis, I just can't imagine where it would make sense.
all right? Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do think the FAR question is often different than one of a conditional use permit. And like others have expressed, I think it's one of those issues that we need to look at as a policy question, how we're regulating the size of buildings. In this case, though, I think, so I recall some recent discussions at Planning Commission Committee of the Whole where we've looked at buildings that requested an FAR variance, and the general sentiment was of not supporting it because the combination of the building's design and its bulk, created something that the Planning Commission felt was not supportable. And in this case, I don't think that's true. I think that the design of the building mitigates against the increased bulk in a way that fits in well with the context. And I think in a building like this, and I understand people have very different feelings about buildings like this, in my opinion, the most important piece of the building is the ground floor where people are walking along. And I think, considering what I think is kind of a lot of parking in this building, the design has been well crafted to, reduce that impact of the parking on the ground floor. That the ground floor is very pedestrian oriented and friendly. That the parts of the building that will be seen as you walk along it are inviting and of a scale that fits in with the surrounding buildings and neighborhood. And then I think, again, the tower, as others have said, is designed in a way that I think is attractive in terms of its height in the neighborhood. So I'm not sure that reducing the height of the tower by half would really do anything different to this building as people experience it in the neighborhood. Certainly, if you looked at it from downtown or other areas, the height of the building matters for the skyline. Anyway, so that's some of my thoughts about the FAR, but I do think it's a question each time we look at FAR variances of how the FAR fits into the overall design of the building, how that interacts with the building's bulk, and how that bulk fits into the surrounding neighborhood.
All right. Commissioner Rockwell, do you have
I just wanted to say, if a fellow commissioners wanted to make the bird safe glass motion, I think this is the context in which to do it because of the nexus between the height increase and the glass available at those heights.
I think it's actually in the site plan review now.
Yep. Commissioner Magrino.
Yeah, and I just had a couple quick comments about that. I do remember a few months ago when we did revise the comp plan to cap that development limit, because it was previously just unlimited technically, and so we put the cap at 800. And I remember very specifically saying, and I think everyone kind of agreeing, that regardless of the comp plan cap, the underlying zoning code was still what was going to govern individual proposals. And so that's sort of part of my thinking with the comp plan there. And secondly, and then last thing I'll say, that's kind of how I started out. I feel that this project is appropriate here, but I probably feel that a lot of things are appropriate all across the city. And the reason we have a zoning code and we have a planning commission is to remove that element of subjectivity from it. And I just, even though I look at it and think that it looks nice, I don't think that by itself is justification to support the FAR variance.
All right. If there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve the variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio. Clerk, please call the roll.
Freeland.
No.
Sweezy.
Aye.
Slack.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Magrino.
No.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
So that is 5-2.
And that motion carries. Moving on to item C, the variance of the pedestrian-oriented overlays.
I'll move item C, variance for the pedestrian-oriented overlay district standards.
And we have a motion and a second for item C, the variance of the pedestrian-oriented overlay standards. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Magrino?
Sorry. I also had concerns with this one. I'm sorry. Allowing the port cochere in the PO overlay district, to me, is a lot like allowing a drive-through in the PO overlay district, and that's something that we have spent a lot of time on in the past 6 months or so. And so I'm not necessarily concerned about the building setback there, but allowing the 2 curb cuts for the parking area right there on Second Street Southeast. So I don't know. I guess I would say I would vote against the motion, but if there's something that we maybe want to do with an amendment to that, maybe eliminating that one of the curb cuts, probably the one further to the west.
All right.
I guess it's just sort of an open-ended.
Yeah. Is there any further discussion on that motion to approve the variance to the PO?
Or I guess I'll make a motion to amend the motion to eliminate the westernmost curb cut on 2nd Street Southeast with the port cochere.
All right. So there is a motion to amend that variance to eliminate the westernmost curb cut. Is there a second? And if there is no second, that motion fails. And so we can go back to our original motion, which is to approve the variance as recommended by staff. If there's no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Bender?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
No.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
Vreeland?
Aye.
So that is 6-1.
And that motion carries. Finally, we have item D, the site plan review. Commissioner Slack.
I will move item D, site plan review, per staff recommendation.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to amend item 2 under D, which is the site plan review motion by Commissioner Slack. So I'm going to read my proposal. It softens the language in front of us just a bit, in particular to this question of having a little more discretion from staff in case we need it, and it's not meant to weaken the overall agreement. So that motion would be that the applicant will work with CPED staff to incorporate bird-safe glazing on glass surfaces on the first 60 feet of the building. The applicant shall work with staff to incorporate where possible, and then from there it would include all of the language in the email in front of us, which are items 1, 2, 3, which has 4 subpoints, and item 4.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to amend condition number 2 of the site plan review related to bird-safe glazing, and Commissioner Bender stated that language. Did we capture that adequately? Okay, Commissioner Bender will give that to the clerk. Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Moving back to our original motion, Commissioner Vreeland.
Yes. It's really not part of the site plan review, but since I no longer have a stick and now have a carrot, I still, as a member of the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board, it is their, they don't approve projects, but they sure want to include the interpretive elements of the St. Anthony Falls Heritage Board's work, and they offer grants to do so. So I really hope that you can find your place in history, whether it's present, past, or future, but there's some sure interesting pieces of what's going on in this district, and I hope you're part of that integrated fabric.
All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion on item D of the site plan review? We have a motion to approve with an amendment to condition 2. Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Bender?
Aye.
Lipke-Pier?
Aye.
Magrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Slack?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
Vreeland?
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. And that concludes our discussion on item 5, also concludes our meeting for today. So we are adjourned. We have committee of the whole this Thursday. Thank you.